Across the UK, online and on DAB. Access all radios.
Talk Radio. Give it some lip. Talk Radio.
Evening. We're going to talk about a brilliant new book that's out about Paul Simon. So stay tuned. We'll have a chat with the guy that wrote that, and then we'll, it's Friday. It's Friday! Yay! Friday feeling!
Late night, Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Woo, Papa Pop, you're mine. Say, woo, Papa Pop, you're mine. Hey, schoolgirl in the second row. The teacher's looking over, so I gotta whisper way down low. You say, woo, Papa Pop, let's meet at the school at 3. She said, hey, but there's one thing more. My school is over at 4:30. Maybe when we're older than a weekend day. Ooh, let's wait. Hey, schoolgirl in the second row. The teacher's looking over, so I gotta whisper way down low. We say, woo, Papa let's meet after school at 3. She said, hey, babe, I got a lot to do. It takes me hours when my homework's through. Someday we'll go steady, so don't you fret. Ooh, not yet. Hey, schoolgirl in the second row. Teacher's looking over, so I gotta whistle way down low. You say, woo, Papa let's meet after school at 3. Then she turned around at me with that gleam in her eye. She said, I'm sorry if I passed you by. I'm gonna skip my homework, gonna cut my class.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. You know, the other week, I played that True or False song. And I asked you to guess who it was. None of you guessed it was Paul Simon. Well, this is Simon and Garfunkel. Now, I was aware this is quite famous. This song. Yeah. This is quite a famous song. This was before they were Simon and Garfunkel, when they were Tom and Jerry, and they kind of. They sort of had a hit and sort of had a bit of a. Oh no. It's not that good. They had a hit, and then they sort of didn't have a hit, and then they went off their separate ways, and kind of all kinds of things happened. And they got back together and became Simon and Garfunkel. And I'm quite. Here's the thing. I'm an old head, right? I'm in my mid-40s, and I love my 60s music. I love it. The Beach Boys and the Monkees and the Beatles and all that. I was quite late coming to realise that Simon and Garfunkel vocally are geniuses, and Paul Simon is a fantastic poet. It's only in the last couple of years when I bought a box set of all their albums for like 20 quid or something, and I sat down and properly listened to them. I thought, wow, this stuff is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I'm really thrilled. And I've been looking for a Simon and Garfunkel book for ages. And I think there's one or two out there that aren't very good. So I was so excited, when I saw that there was a biography of Paul Simon coming out. And I was even more excited when I saw it was written by a guy called Peter Ames, because I've read a couple of his books before. He's an excellent writer. And he's written a brilliant book about the Beach Boys, one of my favourite Beach Boys books. He's written about loads of other bits and pieces as well. The book is called Homeward Bound, The Life of Paul Simon. It's a weighty tome, but every page is a revelation. I'll tweet the link to where you can get it. I'm really thrilled, though. We've got Peter Ames Carlin on the line. Evening, Peter.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very, very well, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I loved your book. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you very much.
There hasn't really been a Paul Simon or a Simon and Garfunkel book before, and that struck me as really odd, because they were so huge that, you know, you look at the Beatles, and I know you've contributed to the Beatles library, you know, there are thousands of books, and the Beach Boys thousands of books, but hardly anything about Simon and Garfunkel. I wondered why that was.
There are a couple good books that actually came out of the UK about, 10, 15, 20 years ago, which are worth tracking down. A lot of good coverage of some of Simon and Garfunkel's stuff. But my approach, I just sort of felt like it had been a long time. And one of the luxuries I had being in America was that I could spend a lot of time in New York City and traveling around the country and digging up a lot of information, from people and archives and, and all kinds of places, just from where they actually grew up, from where they were walking on the streets and the people were easy to come by. So, whenever I write a book, I try to spend as much time as possible turning over every rock I can find on the horizon, because you never know when something great's going to come out. And there were a lot of revelations that I, sort of came up with along the way. And one of them, for instance, was that incredible early tape of Paul at the Brentwood Folk Club in late 1963. That's in the county records office over there in Essex. And among other things, like at the Folk Association Library in London itself. I mean, they have an amazing amount of stuff. And it's just sort of a mystery. Why people don't write about Paul or hadn't really done a big researched bio of him is that he's very opposed to people writing his biography. Including me.
Well, there is that. We'll jump right to the end of the book. There is that deliciously uncomfortable sort of epilogue to the book where you go to see him giving a talk about songwriting, I think it is, and he stares you down, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
He gives you the old skunk
I was sitting there for the longest time. It's amazing. People really sort of connected with that little moment in the book, and it was something that I just wasn't even going to put in there until it just seemed to fit somehow. When I was
it's a great ending. He knew it was you, did he?
Well, it seemed so. I knew he had to know that I was going to be there because I told his brother, who's his co-manager, and the people that were working with him at Emory University were the ones who helped me, get in to see the lectures, which had been sold out for some time. But, so I went, the first one I went to was this public conversation he was going to have with the poet Billy Collins over here. And I walked in. It was in a church type space, and I took a seat in a pew about halfway back. And I got there early, and there were a lot, not many people there at the time. But by the time I finished digging stuff out of my bag, I looked up, and Paul was on stage. And in the amount of time it took for me to register, oh look, Paul's on stage already. I wonder, why he's just sitting there. He's looking around the pews, and suddenly his eyes connected with mine, and he just stared at me for what, an uncomfortably long period of time. And I was sitting there trying to figure out whether he was, is he staring at me? Is he not staring at me?
He might have been doing a 1,000-yard stare, a blank look into the thing, but it was, he locked eyes with you, did he, Peter?
Yeah, he kind of sort of did, and I was sitting there looking back at him because I thought, well, the one thing, I know I'm not sure whether he's looking at me, but I'm not turning away, this is some kind of, wild animals on the veld type of situation, so... and then ultimately, after however much time it was, he put up his hand, in a flat kind of just palm out type of, back off or go away or nothing to see here, and then very pointedly turned away. So that was it, I had met him once very briefly during the rehearsals for the Cape Man at a press event in New York City. But that was just a quick handshake and hi, nice to meet you.
And did you? I'm assuming I imagine it's a courtesy when writing these books, even though the answer will be no, to get in touch, let him know you're writing it, and ask if he'll do an interview.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's just the pro forma thing. But the other thing is, we had a lot of friends in common. I mean, particularly since I'd spent, the previous few years writing that book about Bruce Springsteen and got to know the people in his circle very well, and the people at Columbia Records, where they both were working, recording for at the time, and or for quite a while, I should say. And I thought there was enough good buzz about me in those corners that if he checked in, it would all be good. But he did check in. I know with John Landau, Bruce's manager, and I think John said some nice things about me, and then still nothing, and he was extremely opposed to me.
The impression I get from reading, well, it's not even an impression, you pretty much state it. He is a very, very determined man, in all aspects of his life, to the point where he's not bothered about screwing someone over. I mean, there's the brilliant thing when Tom and Jerry, as Simon and Garfunkel were called when they were kids, they have that kind of first hit, and behind Art Garfunkel's back, Paul Simon goes and signs a solo contract as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, but the amazing thing is that happened, but it happened even before the song was a hit.
Oh, really?
Before they'd even recorded the final version, because it was on the initial contract, or part of the initial contract, or was an offshoot of it, that he and his dad were negotiating with the record company owner, Sid Prosen, weeks before they actually went in and recorded the finished version of the song. And so even before, so it was like Tom and Jerry hadn't really gotten a chance to get off the ground yet before Paul was already sort of, putting together a solo career. Is
it right that thing where he went behind Artie's back? That was kind of the major bone of contention throughout their careers. We all know that Simon and Garfunkel, for a lot of the time they didn't get on. But they were having rows about this in the 80s even.
Oh, yeah. It was sort of the original sin in the Simon and Garfunkel relationship. And, and if it weren't for that incident, there would have, I'm certain there are enough other ones for them, that they have, collected against one another, to probably, the same thing would have happened over something else. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. But Artie was still really upset about it in the 80s. And if you go back, and one of the things that broke up Simon and Garfunkel in the late 60s was when Artie secretly had a handshake deal with the film director Mike Nichols to star in the movie after Catch-22, which was called
Carnal Knowledge, wasn't it?
Yeah, Carnal Knowledge. Thanks. Jack Nicholson was in that as well. But so he shook hands on it and said, "I don't want to, but let's keep it a secret for now." And then after they finished recording Bridge Over Troubled Water, Artie confessed to Paul, said, "I'm going to do this, after this tour is over, I'm gone for at least a year because I'm going to star in this movie I've already agreed to sign." And Paul was furious that Artie hadn't consulted him before coming up with his solo deal. But Artie, as you can imagine, was revenge served cold. Yeah. And, it was okay, well, I'm going to start my own career without telling you either.
There's that delicious bit, I don't know if it's in the late 80s, early 90s, where there's like a sort of theatrical show where the first half is Simon and Garfunkel, and the second half, if I got this right, is him doing his solo kind of stuff. And they have a massive screaming match in the dressing room where pretty much everyone in the theatre can hear them shouting at each other.
Yeah, well, I don't know about the theater, but definitely downstairs in the back area, the large area where everyone's working and, the band members are... It was after the show, and they screamed at each other so long and so violently that they had to cancel the next day's show.
Because they ruined their voices!
Yeah, they ruined their voices,
Paul Simon strikes me as jealous of Art Garfunkel, because Art Garfunkel, this tall... beautiful man with, when he was younger, this sort of almost halo of hair and a voice to die for. And, Paul Simon, short and stumpy and balding and, an amazing talent, but physically and vocally in the shadow of Art Garfunkel. Was he jealous of his partner?
Oh, yeah. For a certain number of things. Obviously, his height and his hair and his blue eyes and his sort of matinee idol looks. But at the same time, Artie, of course, was having a lot of trouble because Paul was, because he was envious of Paul's control over their career because he was the songwriter. And so they needed, Paul felt much more comfortable going on stage and trying to become a pop act with Artie by his side because Artie was not only had that beautiful voice, but was also so great to look at. So when they did go their separate ways, I think, Paul was definitely sort of crippled, paralyzed for a while, trying to figure out what to do next, because how could he possibly go on stage and sing these songs, including Simon and Garfunkel songs, without Artie, by his side to add the gloss, to add the extra beauty to the performance, and so. So that was a big problem, but they were, it's that thing that happens in, I think, a lot of relationships where the thing that draws you to your partner is also the same thing that repulses you from them eventually.
Yeah. Paul Simon's career is so strange because he was one of the few not one of the few, actually. I retract that slightly, but huge in the 60s, pretty big in the 70s. But then, of course, when stratospheric in the mid-80s with the Graceland album, an album that I don't actually like. I think this doesn't work for me, but went massively huge again, and that must have fed his ego quite a bit to have a big smash like Graceland.
Oh yeah, well, sort of the apotheosis of that era, and I think of Paul's solo career was after Rhythm of the Saints came out in, I think, 1990, and then he went on, or 91, and then he went on tour, this huge solo tour, which climaxed with another live concert in Central Park in New York, which is where, and literally almost to the week, 10 years earlier, Simon and Garfunkel had drawn a huge crowd. And launched sort of their early 80s reunion. And so 10 years later, Paul's here, and the place is even more jammed, at least according to the Park Service, and it's just him. And famously, he didn't ask Artie to sing any songs with him, and Artie was so hurt and infuriated by that he left town and gave some bitter interviews about it, I think, to his own disservice. But and that was a beautiful moment. Yeah. Paul had just released back-to-back, insanely great albans. I actually do like...
No, I know I'm in the minority. I prefer...
And that's fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to... everyone doesn't have to agree on everything. And so, but the one thing in your earlier statement, I think one thing that I think you're underestimating is that he was huge in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget... it was just because I was growing up at that time listening to AM radio, certainly for the first half of the 70s, and there was almost never a time when Paul wasn't on the radio.
You're right. I think I meant in terms of comparative sales. Bridge Over Troubled Water sold however many millions, and his solo albums only sold a couple of million.
Yeah, right. What a come down.
Yeah, I know.
So, but he had a number one. I mean, you're right about that. But still, to me, it's like he was so omnipresent during the 70s, and he was hosting Saturday Night Live and making a big hit with those episodes, writing his own stuff, won an Emmy for co-writing his special in 1977.
With Chevy Chase in it, and which is, I watched, it's all on YouTube. I watched all of that.
And it's sort of a cool show, and there's interesting stuff in it. I mean, nobody watched it, so that didn't work out. But right after that, he had another 2-3 back-to-back big hits with "Slip Sliding Away" and the song that and on and on. But you're right. He had that massive moment in the mid-'80s through the early '90s.
His last two albums, I mean, albums don't sell these days, but the last two albums have been critically lauded. He's never really had a dud, apart from the Cape Man Broadway show, but then retrospectively, the music from that is still seen as brilliant, isn't it?
Oh, it is brilliant. Yeah, a lot of it is. I mean, that album that he put out where he does the songs, Paul Simon, I think, sings songs from the Cape, Songs from the Cape Man, I think is what it's called, is just jaw-dropping. I mean, there's 2-3 songs in there that kind of don't stick with me. They're more sort of narrative-driven and, and less kind of, but the stuff he writes these insanely great doo-wop songs and 50s rockers and all the way up through, sort of, Latin music of various types, bombas, and, I mean, it's an incredible piece of work, and it's, of course, produced and performed, to perfection.
Where are Simon and Garfunkel now? Do we know? Do we know if they're still talking, or I'm aware that famously David Crosby and Graham Nash from Crosby, Stills and Nash have had the mother of all fallouts, and they're saying, "I'm never working with that son of a bitch ever again." Do we know where Simon and Garfunkel are with each other?
Pretty much there, at least publicly. I mean, I know that neither Crosby or Nash have ruled out, I guess, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young reunion, which I think Neil wants to do too.
Yeah.
But with Paul and Artie, they toured together. They were just on the verge of, or had sort of started the early legs of a 2-year world tour in 2009, 2010, right around then, when Artie's voice developed that paralysis. And he ended up not being able to do the tour. And then for a few years, it was still very sweet and loving between them in public. But then I don't know what would have happened, but suddenly, and Paul was saying, well, whenever Artie's ready, we're gonna do it again. I'm like really looking forward to it. But God only knows what happened between them, because since about the mid-aughts on, they've just been at each other's throats again. And it's a very, it's dismaying. Yeah.
I've got to say, Peter, just going off on a slight tangent, you've written one of my favourite. I'm a huge Beach Boys fan, and your book, Catch a Wave, it was essential reading when it came out. How did you find? Did you get to meet Brian?
Oh yeah, no, I worked with him very closely on that book.
Yeah.
Actually, I had interviewed him before for a few years. I used to work at People magazine, and then he had a new record coming out, and so I got to go do a profile of him, and I met him and got to hang out a little bit, and we all sort of hit it off. So then when I had other stories, in magazines and newspapers over the next few years, I worked with them then, and then when the book deal came through, they were like, great, come on, whenever you need us, we're here,
Yeah.
And so I had incredible access, and of course the thrilling thing was when I was sort of at the height of my research, was when he was at the height of relaunching Smile.
Yeah, wow, man.
Yeah, so they were sort of in the middle of those sessions, and and I got to see and witness a bunch of really, really cool things.
I've been lucky enough to interview Brian, I think 3 times, and 2 of the times he was there, and 1 of the times he wasn't there, and I was speaking to Robot Brian, But the first time I met him, and I never thought I was going to meet him, and he said to me, "Hey man, what's your favourite Beach Boys song?" And I said, "Oh, it's Marcella." He went, "Really? You like that song?" And then he just started singing it in front of me, and suddenly I was 12 years old, and my hearing, it was, oh God. So to have been in the position you were in, Peter, that must have just been amazing. You must pinch yourself sometimes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, totally. I mean, it's like, you sort of, when you're doing the work with them, you have to kind of put that sort of fanboy in the closet, because you got to be a professional about it. But on the other hand, I mean, there was a moment when I was doing the research for the Brian book, toward the very end of the process, he came through I live in Portland, Oregon, and he came through here with the Smile tour. And I'd seen the show a few times before that, but of course, I wanted to take my family. And so my son, who was then 7, came with us, and I had these all-access passes. So during the break, I said, "You want to go backstage?" So we went backstage, and I was talking to the guys in the band who I know. And then, his wife, Brian's wife, said, I heard her say, "Brian, go say hi to Peter's son." So he came up and kind of kneeled down in front of him, and he said, and this is after, from the time I'm 13 years old, I was sort of one of those guys that really had a deep feeling for the lost album, Smile, and what it would have happened.
I'm there with you, Peter,
all that mythology.
Yeah.
I was neck deep in that. And so, but then many years later, I sort of see it on a different level. But that person, that 12-year-old you talked about, was there very much when Brian came and kneeled down in front of my son, and he said, "So what do you think so far?" And Teddy said, "Oh, pretty good." And he was a little, struck. He didn't quite know what to say. And Brian goes, "Pretty good, huh?" And then he said this thing that just made me shiver all over. He goes, well, wait till you hear Smile. It'll knock your socks off.
Man alive. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful?
And I was there, sort of watching it from every angle at the same time, all the different versions of Beach Boy fans and Brian, being a sort of a student of Brian's work and his life and knowing him a bit and being friendly with him. It just, the whole, after all those years of Smile being this kind of terrible, it was a great myth. He could have lived on that myth forever.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But the fact that he had the strength to, after nearly 40 years, say, you know what, let's finish it. And to actually finish it and have it work and take it around the world and as a performance piece, when Brian had so many bugaboos about that album for so long, was just an amazing, I thought, such a beautiful story of redemption,
Peter, I'm going to let you go in a second. I promise, but I'm having a real fan. Can I ask you, do you know if this story is true? In the 1979, 80, whenever it was, and the Beach Boys have signed to, I think it's Warner Brothers, and they deliver their first album, which was the Light album, and they play it for the head of the record company, and the head of the record company listens, and as the needle lifts off of the second side, he turns around and says, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've just been effed. Is that a true story?
Yeah, that's right. You're right. No, actually, that was right after they signed with Columbia. So that would have been 1978 or 79. Yeah, they were on Warner's during the 70s.
That was it, yeah.
And jumped over to CBS, Columbia for the 80s.
Again.
Anyway,
go on.
And so because it's kind of, L.A. actually turned out to be a decent, surprisingly good record.
I think it's a great record.
Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff on there, and that when you listen to it, you can imagine, Walter Yetnikoff, who was the president of Columbia at the time, is sitting there and he's expecting a great brilliant Beach Boys record with Brian Wilson front and center, and they get that record, and the outtakes from it are pretty excruciating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so,
But Angel Come Home,
after that, everyone was all shocked and furious. But then after that, the word was they had a very productive and good meeting, and the album they eventually turned in was as I said, quite good.
I think it's great. I even love the 12-minute disco song. Peter, what's next? Have you got another project that you're working on already, or do you just kind of wait to see where the mood takes you?
I've got actually a few things in the works that I can't talk about yet, but usually I only kind of work on one book at a time.
Yeah.
But now somehow I've had a productive, dreaming phase. So now I've got 3 different projects I'm pretty excited about. We'll just have to figure out which one I start with and how it all comes down.
Mate, as soon as they're done, you have an open invitation to come and chat, as long as you don't mind me geeking out about the Beach Boys. The book is brilliant. Homeward Bound, The Life of Paul Simon, Peter James Carlin. I'm going to tweet the link. Everyone, it really is. I read it on my week off, and I just couldn't put it down. I kept switching, Peter, between reading your book and watching the OJ documentary. So it was a
good
busy
company.
week. Thank you so much, Peter. It's been a real pleasure.
Hey, my pleasure too, man. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Peter Ames Carlin, Homeward Bound, The Life of Paul Simon. It is such a joy. Quite often you get these biographies and you there's no passion in them. This is just a wonderful, wonderful book. And while you're there, go and buy Catch a Wave, The Rise, Fall and Redemption of the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson. It's a bit older, but it really is a great, great read. In fact, you know what? I'm going to dig that out this weekend and crack that open again. 0344 499 1000. Late Nights with Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
Late Night Iain Lee.
On air and off the leash.
On Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Honestly, I've just tweeted the link. Type in Paul Simon and it's on Amazon or wherever you get your books. If you go to a bookstore, it's such a joy. And the fact that in the 90s they were still arguing about a deal Paul Simon cut behind Art Garfunkel's back in 1957. They were kids. Literally, they were I think they're about 15 years old. It is incredible. Such a good book, and what a fascinating gentleman. I love that. We'll get Peter on again. We'll find an excuse to get him on again. We've got his phone number. He's going nowhere. It's Friday. It's 10:33. Check your radar diaries now. Late nights with Iain Lee on Talk Radio. We've had a strange kind of week, really. It's been a bit existential, a bit esoteric. So tonight, you can call in with whatever you fancy, really. I've not been through the papers. I've not looked through the papers. So I don't know what's going on. Everyone's got their knickers in a twist because of George Osborne getting a job. I mean, yeah, really? I don't think anyone cares, do they? Apart from journalists. Journalists seem to be the only people that care about that story. I couldn't give a monkeys. So I don't have anything, which some of you, sometimes I get emails and tweets from people saying, you lazy git, do a bit of work. Well, I read that Paul Simon book. That took me 3 days. I did 3 days work. Do a bit of prep. Prep so dull. Please, miss, I haven't done my homework. Can we just sit and talk? Yeah, we'll do that instead. If you're a new listener, and thank you. We're getting so many new listeners every night, every week. We're getting more and more listeners. I know because you email me and you tweet me. Thank you. The way this works is I will sit here and I will, kind of spew stuff out of my head. And you're more than welcome to call in about any of the words that fall out of my mouth. Or you can call in about anything you fancy yourself. Even George Osborne, if you want to talk about that. I mean, it really is anything goes. We did yesterday, thanks to some callers, we did start nudging towards... We didn't start nudging. We ran up and licked conspiracy theories a little bit. And I'm always happy to take your calls on conspiracy theories. When it comes to those things, I tend to be quite straight-laced. I generally buy the official line on things. Generally, I do. I do think Princess Diana was killed because she was being driven by a drunk person who was going too fast and they weren't wearing seatbelts. That's what I think. I do think that 9/11 was a bunch of Saudi terrorists who'd put in 2 years of training to fly planes and then they went and hijacked planes. I do think that that's that. And the buildings collapsed because they were hit by two massive jumbos. That's what I think. Of course we landed on the moon. Why would they fake the moon landings? I mean, we've really gone above and beyond this week, I suppose, actually, with the flat Earth and the hollow Earth. So I'm really happy for you to call in if you have got theories or ideas that are outside of the norm. And I hope if you have been listening this week, you have heard me speaking to a gentleman who thinks the Earth is hollow and that Nazis live in there. A gentleman who believes that before he was born, he was given the choice of either coming to this planet or a purple plant-based planet, and he chose this one because he liked the colour. And the guy who phoned in about Princess Diana. I hope you think I've given them, as I would give you, if you were to call in, a fair crack of the whip. I've challenged them because that is only right, I think. Actually, I didn't challenge the Hollow Earth guy. I felt sorry for him. But I'm not... It's not one of those shows where I'm going to laugh at you and take the mick. You'll get a fair hearing, and I'll question it, but it's not one of those shows where people do think this show is cruel. A woman, do you remember yesterday, last night's show? Iain, Jay and Alan, I'll come to you in a bit, 0344 499 1000. Last night's show, we had a caller called Mark, and it was a nice little clip, and we posted it online. A young lady said, no wonder you don't get any calls anymore, fake news. We got a load of calls last night. No wonder you don't get calls anymore. Do you think it's funny to ignore your callers? And I replied to her about 2:00 in the morning. I deleted it instantly because I thought I'm trying not to reply to people on Twitter. But my reply was, we do get callers. And I didn't ignore Mark at all. If you were listening, I was giving him a verbal cue to start speaking. It's kind of an accepted cue to say someone's name. Mark. It's slightly easier if they're there because you can indicate with your hand. Mark. Mark. I was giving him a cue to speak. I was never talking over him. I was only speaking in between what he said. So I don't think it was cruel or mean or even ignoring. I did think it was funny. Yeah, I thought it was funny. But, so what's the point I'm trying to make? There is no point. None of this matters. But some people will hear, Mr. Ethical, for example, is another gentleman. They will hear a mean show. And this isn't a mean show at all. Au contraire, this is a very warm, open show. It's a drop-in centre for the lost and befuddled, I like to describe it as. And everyone gets a fair crack of the whip. And I will challenge a 43-year-old man as much as I would challenge a 12-year-old girl, as much as I would challenge a 92-year-old man. Everyone gets equal treatment here. And some people think, oh, he's an old man. Shouldn't be questioned. Oh, it's a kid. Oh, it's a disabled person. You were a bit harsh on them. No. No. Everyone gets treated the same on this show, whatever their age, their physical or mental capabilities. They will be treated as a responsible person who is able to engage in a conversation. With that in mind, I open the phone lines to you. I've got 3 calls lined up already, and I will get to those after these sets of ads. But you're welcome to call in. If any of what I've just said has made sense, well, then there's probably something wrong with you, because I'm just rambling. I don't know what I'm saying. The way it works is, you dial us up, we take your details, we call you back. The phone number is 0344 499 1000. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to Tick Your Radar Diaries now. Late Nights with Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
Late Night, Iain Lee on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Right, let's crack on with the calls, shall we? Let's go to Iain first. Evening, Iain.
Hi, Iain. All right, how's it going?
Yeah, it's all right. What you got for us?
Come on. Well, the other day, he says about there was no characters with narcolepsy in like shows.
I did put forward that hypothesis that the narcoleptics were woefully underrepresented in popular culture. Yes.
Right. Well, this is what I need help with. It's like a long time ago. It was either Biker Grove or Grange Hill, and there was a character, and he had narcolepsy, and he was hiding it from people. Oh. And there's a scene I remember where he fell asleep in the toilet. That's all I can remember.
That rings a very tiny distant bell. It wasn't that kid that died in the teacher's car, was it, in Grange Hill?
I can't remember.
It was, Danny somebody died. Danny Kendall, didn't he die in a teacher's car?
I'm not sure. I think the only dates I could put it between would be like 98 to, I don't know, 2002.
Oh no, that's Danny Kendall was way before that. 98.
Right.
I was 25. I wasn't watching. Well, I probably was watching Kids.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying it. So it might ring like a bell in someone.
All right, we'll put it out there. We think there may have been a narcoleptic in either Grange Hill or Byker Grove just at the end of the last century.
Yeah.
Nice one, Ian.
All right.
Thank you, mate. Cheers. Let's go to Jay. Evening, Jay.
Good evening.
Oh, no, hang on. Sorry, Jay. Hang on. Oh, hang on a minute. Jay, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yes, boss.
Oh, that's all right. How are you doing, mate?
I'm all right.
I have binged tonight.
On what?
I have binged on beer and whiskey and pizza and Iain Lee podcast.
Oh, God.
I've listened to every single one from this week in one fell swoop.
Oh, that's going to rot to your brain.
I think I'm losing my mind.
Yes, mate.
Firstly, mate, it's great to have you back.
Yes.
I've very much enjoyed all of the output I've just binged on.
Well done. I had to make a political stance last week, and let's just say James O'Brien won an award this week. Thank you.
Oh.
I thank you. Good radio has been rewarded partly because of the pressure that the strike put on the award organisers.
I joined on the strike. I only listened to. I didn't listen to any talk-based radio. Was that okay? Was that enough?
Well, so you scabbed a bit.
I scabbed on music radio.
Well,
and I scabbed on podcasts of radio shows.
Podcasts are called. Hey, listen. I'm not going to fall out with. I'm not going to do what they did to the fella in Brookside when he scabbed, and they drove. He went mad because he scabbed, and so he drove his car round and round the garden, and like a teddy bear, and he ripped up the garden. I'm not gonna. Billy Corkill, that was it. I'm not gonna. That was Billy Corkill.
That is a reference before my time, mate. I'm sorry.
Shut up, man. What are you talking about? Billy Corkill is of our time. He is, well, I don't know.
Well, are you going to guess my age then, because you're good at that?
No, I only do it. Well, you're 28.
You're way off your usual margin of error.
Well, go on.
I'm 35.
Well, hang on a minute. That's bullshine then, because you just said that you were young. I would have said 36.
No, I'm sorry. I said... you can't say that now. No, I said I was too young for Brookside.
No, you're not too... 30, no, Jay, you have given fake news. 36 is not too young for Brookside. What the hell are you talking about?
When was that Jimmy Corker? I was probably like 84. I think
you said you were too young for Brookside. So I instantly completely... First of all, I only ever call out people's ages when I'm confident of them, right? So when people say, go on, what's my age? I can never get it. But I would have said 36. But I undercut myself because you said you were too young for Brookside, making me think that you grew up in a post-Brookside world. You didn't. You were not too young for Brookside.
The only thing I remember from Brookside was the dodgy relationship with Beth Watson.
Oh, hang on a minute, mate. Sorry. So you remember something from Brookside, a programme that you were too young for?
I said I was too young for the...
But you didn't. No, you didn't. You said you were too young for Brookside, right? So instantly I'm shaving 10 years off your age. And then you're going... Oh yeah, but I remember bits of Brookside. Oh, so you weren't too young.
I remember the tail end. I do. The tail end. I do.
Unbelievable. Anyway, Kath, you put this bloke through, did you? And I'm going to have a word with you after the show because he should not have got through. This guy should not be on the air.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put it in the back foot. Can I talk about what I wanted to talk about?
Please do, Jay. That would be greatly appreciated. Go on.
I want to know where I can get hold of some tramadol.
Don't know.
Because that stuff seems like a lot of fun.
No, don't. And I have to say this because my bosses will tell me off and someone will complain. You don't only use tramadol if it is prescribed to you by a physician. Follow the correct dosage. What
on earth happened on Wednesday? It was dynamite listening, but what on earth? I've never heard such concentrated claptrap from the entire show. I mean, it was intense.
It felt like, to me, you're probably too young to remember this, it felt like a proper phone-in show from the late 90s. You probably weren't born then.
Well, I didn't listen to talk radio.
No, of course you didn't. But now you're going to go and quote some bits from there, aren't you? Yeah.
But, no, it was... even people who previously I thought were solid... You know, Martin Sweetheart and
you did not think Martin Sweetheart was solid?
He was lovely, and then he went crazy. No, I don't want to use the word crazy, but he went peculiar. I mean, it was great listening, and they seem like very likable people. But oh my goodness, the things they were talking about. And you said you were worried about being too harsh on people. I think you go too easy on some of people.
Oh no! I tell you why. I'm doing that. I'm experimenting. I'm changing your image, darlings. I'm experimenting with just easing off the throttle. In fact, I'm experimenting with parking the car in a lay-by at the moment because I quite like because the show you're talking about Wednesday, right? I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything, and it was one of the best shows that I've ever done.
It was great.
Because people
out chunks of my hair. It was great. I pulled out chunks of my hair.
Yeah, you say, and that's because I eased off the accelerator. Jay, listen, thank you very much indeed. Tramadol is a very, very naughty drug. But only use it if it is prescribed. LBC were doing a massive advert for Spice today. I think they thought it was an anti-Spice feature, but honestly, I was listening to it as I was out walking the dog. They did a 20-minute thing about Spice, this drug, right? And I'm texting my mate going, are you listening to this? It doesn't half sound good. Honestly. And then this is really odd, right? So there's a reporter talking to O'Brien, right? And the reporter then named a specific alleyway off of a specific street near Leicester Square, right? And he said, do you know that alleyway? And James said, oh yeah, I walk past it every day. Named it so we could locate it. He said, right. Have you noticed that there's always a queue of people there? He said, yeah, what's the queue for? He said, right, at the end of the alleyway, there's a phone number on the wall, and you phone up that number, and someone will come and meet you on a Boris bike and deliver you Spice. And James said, oh, that's interesting. And they broadcast the exact... I'm being deliberately vague because I'm a professional. They broadcast the exact location to go and find a phone number to get this drug delivered to you. And I'm thinking someone's gonna say something in a minute. Someone's gonna apologise or say don't go and do that. Or no, they didn't. They left it at that. Don't do drugs, kids. Don't do drugs is my advice. But why would you listen to an old fart? Abraham.
Hello.
Hello, Abraham.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. What you got for us?
When you're talking about conspiracy theories, yes. I've got one.
Go on.
Everyone that's got a mobile phone, they're walking around with a bugging device. It's got audio, it's got cameras, and the government can switch it on and listen to what you're talking about. And watch what you're doing at any time.
There was a story in the papers last week that those Fitbit, those little black wristbands you see idiots wearing, that spies can hack into your Fitbit. I don't know why.
Yeah, but they don't need to do that. They could tap into your phone.
Right? Yeah.
It's only an app. Really.
But do you think the government is actually doing that?
I think the government could pinpoint, targets that they want to do that to, yeah.
So you think that they're doing it?
I don't think they're doing it to me.
No, well, here's the thing, right? I'm going to say something, and I don't mean this to be offensive, okay?
Yeah.
How come we haven't had a major terrorist atrocity in this country for quite a long time? I'm thinking of the Bataclan. I'm thinking of the other attacks that they had in Paris. There's all the. Why have we not had one in this country that I can think of? Obviously, there was Lee Rigby, but I'm thinking of a big, kind of explosion. The only one we had was 7/7. The only one. The last big one. Is it because our intelligence services are so bang on the money that they are spotting these things before they happen?
Yeah, we probably don't hear about.
Is it that? Is it because the ISIS agents in this country are idiots, or is it because? And here's a conspiracy theory that I'm happy to explore.
Yeah.
The threat is minute. ISIS is not the all-powerful evil that we've been told it is, and that there is no threat, but they're using the threat of ISIS, the government, to keep us living in fear.
I agree with that.
Well, I'm not saying that's definitely the case, but I'm saying that is a possibility. Do you not think it's odd we've not had, a bomb going off on a train, or, a couple of idiots with machine guns at a Whiteley shopping centre or something? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, putting the people at fear makes them legitimately able to put more cameras out there, more security out there, more police force out there, more control. Yeah.
Abraham, listen, thank you for that. Alan, we're going to come to you after the news, give you a fair crack of the whip. I don't know where you've sent it, Catherine, but it's certainly not to my email address. Do you know what I mean? It really does strike me. Catherine's saying that the top cops reckon they've foiled 13 attacks since Lee Rigby. Okay. Have they, though? Have they? I don't know. I'm not, saying this as fact. I'm not saying this to, make light of those horrific events. Of course not. But, is it because our intelligence services are bang on the money, bang, completely inappropriate word, or is it because there is no threat? 0344 499 1000, late nights with Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
Talk Radio.
Biffo the Bear's listening to a different radio show. Oh, God almighty. Oh, dear.
Late night, Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Such a good bit of music. And I think I might be the only person that likes the original Casino Royale movie. It's a mess. 5 directors. The directors all kept leaving. They kept leaving, partly because they said they couldn't work with Peter Sellers. 5 directors! And it looks like it. It looks like 5 different movies just stuck together. And how many Bonds are in it? I think there are... there's David Niven. Is Peter Sellers Bond in it? Woody Allen is Jimmy Bond. Is there a 4th? There's a 4th, I think. Biffo is unhappy with me. I don't know what show Biffo is listening to, but I suggest your IQ is not up to scratch for this one. Biffo says, Iain Lee gives great radio, but his politics let him down. Dismissing Lee Rigby and 7-7. Don't mix the two. It doesn't work. In fact, I'm sure I went to pains to say at least 2 or 3 times, I'm not being dismissive of those horrific... I'm sure I did, yeah. Go and listen to Talk Sport. I think that's more suited at your level, Biffo. Well done. Good lad. Good lad. Fingers crossed, we're working on the mighty Herb Alpert coming on this show. Oh, and who's doing a tour of the UK later in the year? Mr. Neil Sedaka. Let's get Neil Sedaka on this show. What we'll do, here's what we'll do. We'll go and meet Neil Sedaka and we'll take a little tiny Bontempi and we'll get him to play his songs on a Bontempi. That's what we're going to do. I'm tempted to watch the Casino Royale. It really is a mess. 5 directors. They just kept leaving, saying, I can't do this, can't work with this. But I remember watching it as a kid and loving it. There's a brilliant gag with Bernard Cribbins, who's also coming on the show soon, hopefully, where he drives a taxi from London to India or something, doesn't he? Beautiful, beautiful mess. There's a real interesting... I've got a friend, and I use the term friend loosely. No, I don't, because I was going to say, because I've only met him twice, briefly. But actually, friendship these days can be entirely digital. It's a legitimate form, and we communicate on various Twitter feeds, and he's a music nerd like me. But a bloke called Andrew Hickey, he's a brilliant writer as well. He self-publishes or crowdfunds books about the Beach Boys and about the Monkees and things, and they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I tell you why they're brilliant, because quite often I disagree with him a lot, and I love having, argue. I love reading his books going, well, that's wrong. Well, that song's brilliant. What's the idiot talking about? I love it. And he's a great writer, and I follow him on Twitter, and he's really good. But he's thinking of writing a blog, and I do think he should, about a very specific subgenre of movies. In the mid to late 60s, there were a series of British surrealist movies. Casino Royale, I think, just about fits into that. There's a brilliant film written by Spike Milligan called The Bed-Sitting Room. Oh, it's great. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore are in it. I think Harry Seacombe's in it. It's about Britain after it's been wiped out by a nuclear holocaust. Oh, and it's funny. And one of the characters, it's surreal, right? One of the characters, and I can't remember how or why, but turns into a bedsit. Literally turns into a bedsit. It's the weirdest thing. I haven't seen it for a while. I got it on a bootleg copy, but you can get it officially now. My sister bought it for me for a birthday. I need to watch it again, because it's just marvellous. Other surreal films, The Magic Christian, which we've talked about a lot on this show. There's a great one starring, here's a pairing, Michael Crawford and John Lennon, called How I Won the War. Oh, it's brilliant. And it's who's in it? Everybody's in it. They're all the same people who are in these films. It's Michael Crawford, John Lennon, please sir, me feet's wet, sir. Roy Kinnear, the bloke who did, who's the bloke who did the voice of Paddington? Michael, Bond. No, the guy who reads it. Maybe he wasn't called Michael. You know the guy, the old guy. Lance Percival probably pops up in it at some point. And it's brilliant. It's about the most inept army troop being sent to war. And they all get killed. Apart from Michael Crawford, who's an upper-class twit. And he survives. Michael Hordern. Thank you, Catherine. And it's wonderful. And I love it. And when they die, the character is still there, but they're painted like blue or green or yellow. Oh, it's a great film. It really is. It's lots of silences in it. Wonderful, wonderful silences. And why am I talking about that? I don't know. Just seemed like a nice thing. Oh, Bedazzled, of course, the Peter Cook and Dudley Moore film, which is just... Have you seen Bedazzled, Kath? Oh, it's so good. It's just beautiful. And Eleanor Bron in it, her most stunning, and Peter Cook is his most slimy, and Dudley Moore is most dumb. It's just wonderful. I don't know why I'm talking about that. That's the kind of show. I'll start talking about something and end up talking about how beautiful I think Eleanor Bron is. Kids, you still listening? You can watch the show tonight on Periscope. We've been on Periscope all week. We'll probably be on Periscope all of next week. I do Periscope when I'm feeling okay. When I'm feeling lousy, we don't do Periscope. But if you go to periscope.tv/Iain Lee, IAINLEE, it'll pop up. And during the adverts, I might sing you some songs on my ukulele. 03, let's crack on with the show, Lee. Enough of this bullshine, for goodness sakes. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Alan? Has he fallen asleep again? Alan? Okay, there we go. I'm making up. There's a tension between myself and Alan. I don't know if it's a sense of entitlement. I don't know, but I don't know what's going on. Well, that leaves us at a crossroads. dear listener, as because Alan's fallen asleep and I've been wittering on so much. We have no phone calls. Yes, we have no phone calls, dear listener. And I haven't looked in the newspapers. So, we potentially have nothing. Potentially have nothing. We might have something. Well, I've literally got nothing else to do, okay? I don't have any phone calls. I don't have any stories in the newspapers. So I'll read. I might as well. I've got nothing else. If you want to call in, you're more than welcome to 0344 499 1000. One of the great joys of I need to angle the light ever so slightly so I can read what I'm saying. One of the great joys of Amazon is you can buy books for a penny. Yes, you have to pay £2.80 postage, and that always gets me every single time. But you can buy books for a penny. And I bought this book. I think I bought it just before he died. The Gene Wilder autobiography. I say the Gene Wilder, the autobiography. I think he may have written a few more books. I'm not totally sure. Kiss Me Like a Stranger. So I can sit here and read, if you'd like. I have nothing else. Blank sheet of paper. No newspapers. No calls. So we'll do it then, shall we? Kiss Me Like a Stranger, Gene Wilder, the autobiography. When was this written? Published in 2006. Well, the paperback was, so maybe the hardback. 2005, okay. To Karen, without whom I would be floating like a cork in the ocean. Isn't that a nice dedication? Kiss Me Like a Stranger. Prologue. I won't do the voice. Suppose you're walking out of the Plaza Hotel in New York City on a warm spring day. You breathe in the lovely fresh air as you step outside and walk down the red-carpeted stairs, saying a quick, "Hi again," to the uniformed doorman. You want to go directly across the street to Bergdorf's men's shop on Fifth Avenue, but the Plaza fountain is directly in your path, with people from all walks of life sitting on the ledge of the fountain, eating sandwiches in what's left of their lunch hour, talking to their friends from the office, maybe flirting with some new acquaintance, and whispering arrangements for a love tryst that night. Gosh, you feel like you're there. What brilliant descriptive opening 2 paragraphs. Perhaps some are taking a short sunbath. I've never heard it called that before. Isn't that lovely? Did you hear that? A sunbath. Isn't that? Of course, sunbathing, it's a sunbath. I've never heard that phrase before. Boom, I'm in. A penny well spent. Perhaps some are taking a short sunbath on this first beautiful day of the year, or even sneaking in a quick snooze as they lean their backs against the famous fountain where Zelda Fitzgerald once jumped in fully clothed. You can get to the shop on Fifth Avenue by walking around the fountain or on the path to your left, or by taking the path to your right. I believe that whichever choice you make could change your life. I'm sure everyone has had these mysterious brushes with irony, perhaps referring to them years later as almost fate. Here are a few of mine. Chapter 1. 1962, New York. I walked into Marjorie Wallace's small office on West 79th Street. I was very nervous. "What do I call you?" I asked. "What do you want to call me?" "I heard Dr. Steiner call you Margie on the telephone. Is that all right?" "Margie it is. Sit down." She indicated the plain couch in front of me. There were no pictures on the walls. Margie sat in a comfortable-looking armchair with an ottoman, which she wasn't using, resting in front of her. Her face wasn't warm, but it wasn't stern either. "What seems to be the trouble?" she asked. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. "I want to give all my money away." "How much do you have?" "I owe $300. She looked at me silently for 4 or 5 seconds. "I see. Well, let's get to work, and maybe by the time you have some money, you'll be wise enough to know what to do with it. In the meantime, tell me about—" And then she asked me a lot of questions. "Your mother was how old? How did you feel when the doctor said that? Have you ever tried to blah, blah, blah?" I took so many long pauses before I answered each question that I thought she might throw me out, but she just sat there with her feet up on the ottoman now and waited. When I did start talking again, she made little notes on a small pad that rested on her lap. What I couldn't understand was this. Why on earth was I thinking about a 15-year-old girl named Seema Clark during all my long pauses in between Margie's questions? Seema kept popping into my head while I was talking about my mother and doctors and heart attacks and my Russian father and masturbation. I thought Seema was Eurasian when I met her the first time. She certainly didn't look Jewish, but when we both came out of the synagogue together, I realised that she must be Jewish. She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. I was only 15, but I'd seen a lot of movies, and I thought she looked like a very thin teenage Rita Hayworth. I was her date when Seema had her 15th birthday party. There were 8 or 10 other kids at her house that night, all laughing their heads off at some Weisenheimer who was hypnotising one of the girls. I thought he was pretty stupid, but I enjoyed watching the cocky little faker who thought he knew how to hypnotise people because he'd read his uncle's book on hypnosis. Seema held my hand while we watched the hypnotist go through his fake talk. I knew she really liked me. She looked so pretty that night, with a pink barrette in her hair and wearing a brand new yellow Angora sweater. Her mother served all of us birthday cake and some delicious coffee. When all the other kids had gone home, Mrs. Clark showed me the coffee can because I had said how good the coffee tasted. It was A&P's 8 o'clock coffee. And then her mother said goodnight and left Seema and me alone. We sat on the couch in an almost dark living room and started kissing. I was shy, but I didn't want Seema to know how shy I really was, so I put on an act as if I were used to all this kissing in the dark with no one around. I thought that she was probably more experienced than I was, and I decided that it was about time for me to feel a girl's breast. Well, I can't say I decided. I was just going on what I'd heard from all the other boys my age, especially my cousin Buddy, who was 9 months older than me. It took me about 8 minutes to get my hand near the start of Seema's breast. The hairs of her new Angora sweater kept coming off in my fingers, which certainly didn't help any. After another 3 or 4 minutes, I finally put my hand on about 1/3 of her breast. As soon as I did, she jerked away. My mouth went dry. She looked at me with such disappointment in her eyes and said, "You're just like all the other boys, aren't you?" I flushed so hot I thought I'd burst. I couldn't understand why she didn't say anything during all the kissing and creeping up the fake Angora. Why didn't she just say no, or "I don't want you to do that," or anything but what she did say? I wanted to tell her that I wasn't at all like all the other boys, that I thought she would like what I was doing, that I thought she was waiting for me to do it. But I was too embarrassed to say any of those things. I just said, "I'm sorry, Seema," and then wished her happy birthday and got out of there as fast as I could. Of course, this all happened in little pictures that popped into my head during the long pauses with Margie. The whole memory probably lasted only a few seconds. Margie's voice suddenly burst in. "Where are you?" "What do you mean?" "Lie down on the couch. You're not as innocent as you pretend, and Dr. Steiner assures me that you're no dummy. I want you to start talking and tell me everything that crosses your mind. Everything. However embarrassing or insignificant you think it is. I don't know whether or not I can help you, and I don't know how many times you and I will be seeing each other in the future. But whether it's one time more or several years, Don't ever lie to me. That's the end of chapter 1.
Late night Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
We've got some calls, Dan and John and Mark and Dredge, but would you indulge me for a few more minutes? Because I'm actually getting quite into this. I will come to you in a minute, I promise. I just want to see where Chapter 2 takes us. Chapter 2. If you just tuned in, I'm reading the Gene Wilder autobiography, Kiss Me Like a Stranger, from about 2005. Chapter 2. Can a few words change your life? Milwaukee. I used to be Jerry Silberman. When I was 8 years old, my mother had her first heart attack. After my father brought her home from the hospital, her fat heart specialist came to see how she was doing. He visited with her for about 10 minutes, and then on his way out of the house, he grabbed my right arm, leaned his sweaty face against my cheek, and whispered in my ear, "Don't ever argue with your mother. You might kill her." I didn't know what to make of that, except that I could kill my mother if I got angry with her. The other thing he said was, try to make her laugh. So I tried. It was the first time I ever consciously tried to make someone laugh. I did Jewish accents and German accents and Danny Kaye songs that I learnt from his first album. And I did make my mother laugh. Every once in a while, if I was a little too successful, she'd run to the bathroom squealing, "Oh, Jerry, now look what you've made me do." Some people, when they step into the ring, lead with their left, some lead with their right. I always led with my sister. It was a Saturday night. I was 11. My sister, Corinne, was 16, and she was giving an acting recital at the Wisconsin College of Music, where her teacher, Herman Gottlieb, had his studio. It was a small auditorium stuffed with about 200 people. While everyone sat and waited for the show to start, there was so much loud talking that I wondered how Corinne would stand it. When the lights started to fade, everyone talked louder for a few seconds. Then they all whispered. Then, darkness. A spotlight hit the centre of the stage, and there was Corinne, wearing a full-length aqua gown. For the next 20 minutes, she performed The Necklace, a short story by Guy de Maupassant that she had memorised. All eyes were on Corinne. The audience was listening to every word. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone applauded her at the end. I remember thinking that this must be as close to actually being God as you could get. I went up to Mr. Gottlieb and asked if I could study acting with him. "How old are you?" he asked. 11. "Wait till you're 13. If you still want to study acting, I'll take you on." When my mother was in pain, the fat heart specialist came to our house. I say fat only because Dr. Rosenthal died of a heart attack a few years later. Even though I was very young, I instinctively associated his death with how many Cokes he drank whenever he came to our house. One day he came because my mother felt a terrible pressure in her chest. Dr. Rosenthal told me to go around the corner where they were putting up a new house, steal a heavy brick, and then wrap the brick in a washcloth and place it on top of my mother's chest over her heart. It sounded crazy. I waited until all the workers had left the new house. At the end of the day, I then went and picked up a good-sized brick, tucked it under my sweater, and walked home as fast as I could. I wrapped the brick in a washcloth and placed it on top of my mother's chest. Oh, honey, that feels so good. In the months that followed, I would substitute my head for the brick. I'd push my head down with both hands as hard as I could, and she liked that even more than the brick. One Sunday afternoon, my dad dropped me off at the Uptown movie theatre so I could see a Sunday matinee. I didn't tell him that I'd taken his flashlight out of the utility closet and hidden it in my jacket. After I paid the cashier and brought my popcorn and milk duds, I went into the theatre, which was almost full. The picture had already started, but in those days most people were used to coming in after a movie started. They would stay until they saw a familiar scene in the next showing and then leave. This Sunday the movie was Double Indemnity with Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray. It was in black and white. I watched for about 20 minutes, but when it started getting mushy, kissing, I took the flashlight out of my jacket and began shining it onto the screen. When people looked around to see which punk was doing this, I shut the flashlight off fast. When the audience settled down again, I switched the flashlight back on. I started making circles on the screen, my beam of light competing with the beam from the projector. I got such a feeling of joy from doing this, until the manager came down the aisle with a horrible look on his face and told me to come with him. I followed him into his office. What's your name? Jerry Silberman. Please don't tell my father. Give me the flashlight. He took my father's flashlight and kicked me out of the theatre. It was drizzling outside. I felt ashamed standing under the overhang in front of the theatre, wondering whether or not to tell my dad about his flashlight and about the manager kicking me out. I decided it would be safer if I waited till my dad noticed the missing flashlight himself, and that might not happen for months. He was born in Russia but came to Milwaukee with his family when he was 11. He wasn't dumb, but he was very innocent, and I knew what I could get by with if I wanted to evade a situation. After I waited in the rain for an hour and 10 minutes, my father drove up. I jumped into the car. So, how was the movie, he asked. It was great, Daddy. It was really good. I started talking about acting lessons with Herman Gottlieb the day after my 13th birthday. Okay. Gene Wilder, Kiss Me Like a Stranger. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's go to Dan. Evening, Dan.
Evening, how are you?
Good, thank you, Dan. What you got for us?
Yeah, I just heard you were looking for someone to call, so I decided to ring in. I don't quite know how to follow that, though.
Well, you don't have to. Well, you're only following it in terms of the structure of time, but you don't have to top it.
No, I know nothing about Gene Wilder at all. I know he's an actor, but...
Keep listening.
Yeah.
Keep listening. I think we're going to find out a lot about him tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, a first time caller, and love the show, and mainly listen to podcasts, and been listening since sort of March and whatever. And I know you don't take compliments that well, but honestly, great show, really like it.
Thank you, Dan. When you say March, do you mean March of this year or March of last year?
March of last year.
Okay, because we're coming up. I think it's next week. It's the first anniversary of the newly, of talk radio in this incarnation. So it will have been a year, and I think it's I think it's achieved some great stuff. I think there has been some brilliant radio created as a direct result of it. So, I'm glad that people like you are finding it and are listening and are deciding to call in as well.
Yeah, it's just it's the honesty of it all. It just, there's no filter to me. It doesn't seem to me. Everyone you talk to and everything you do is just honest, and it is as it is, and we don't, you don't hear much of that these days. So,
do you listen to any other shows on the station, Dan?
No.
May I recommend one that you might like, and people that like this show. Quite often like this show I'm going to recommend, but also some people that like the show hate that show, and vice versa. But John Holmes, he's on in the weekday. I think there's a podcast as well of John's.
Right.
John Holmes, he's on 1 till 4, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
And I would say give it a couple of goes, because it's different to this. He's got his own style, and it might not click the first listen, so I would suggest give it a couple of listens and see if you like it. But I think he's doing he's unique, and it's not very often you can say that genuinely about someone. He's unique, and I think he's doing some great stuff.
Yeah, I'll definitely check him out. Yeah, that sounds good.
Nice one, Dan. Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. John Holmes, if you are looking for the podcast, HOLMES. Monday to Fridays, 1 till 4. There is a lot of crossover, I notice, in listeners to this show and to John's show. And John's show is, I believe, in the last set of figures, the most popular show on this station. How's about that? John and Mark, we'll come to you in a bit. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to Kiss Me Like a Stranger, the Gene Wilder autobiography. I bought it for a penny on Amazon, and let's see how far we get with it.
Late night, Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
I was 11 when I learnt about sex. From my cousin Buddy, naturally. We were both in a co-ed summer camp. I couldn't believe what he was saying. Oh, Buddy, what are you talking about? It's the truth. You put your poopy into her thing. Honest to God. Well, how could that ever make babies? Because you've got to put your germs into her germs. That's how you do it. Well, what if you're embarrassed? I'm not going to take it out in front of a girl. Are you telling me you wouldn't like to show it to her if she showed you her whatchamacallit? Well, then Cousin Buddy told this crazy idea to Alan Pincus, another one of our friends. Alan was more shocked than I was. You're nuts. Well, how do you think you get babies, Alan? Do you think the stork brings them? Buddy tried his best to make Alan feel like a baby. Alan was embarrassed. No, of course not. I just thought it came from putting your saliva in with her saliva. You mean spitting at each other? Hang on. Excuse me. You mean spitting at each other? Buddy laughed so hard that I started laughing too. That was when I figured that Buddy must be right. He was an expert about these kinds of things. We never talked about sex in my family when I was growing up. The only time I came close to asking about it was when I was in 2nd grade and I was walking home from school with 2 other boys. We saw a naked lady through her living room window, lying on a sofa, scratching her tush while she read a book. When she saw 3 little boys... OK, I'm going to have to censor this a bit. When she saw 3 little boys staring at her, she jumped up and closed the curtains. We ran away, and I heard one of the boys use the word F. When I got home, I didn't tell my mother about the naked lady, but I did ask her what F means. You want to know what F means? She asked, as she pulled me into the bathroom and turned on the faucet. She ran a bar of ivory soap under the water and stuck it in my mouth. There, now you know what F means. I started crying, and then, as was her habit until she died, she started crying and begging me to forgive her. Begging and begging, until I finally went into her arms and she hugged me and kissed my tears and kept repeating, I'm sorry, honey. I was wrong. Can you ever forgive me? My mother had a distant cousin who lived in Los Angeles and whose 13-year-old son was going to a place called Black Fox Military Institute, run by retired Colonel Black and retired Colonel Fox. My mother's cousin said she thought it was a wonderful place, and it was in Hollywood, California. What she didn't mention was that her son was going to Black Fox as a day student, so he went home each afternoon after school. Since my mother was ill and felt that she and my father couldn't give me the kind of training that I needed, now that I was 13, she thought I still didn't know how babies were made, and I didn't have the guts to tell her that I did. She got it into her head that Black Fox Military Institute might be the perfect answer. I think she was influenced by a movie called Diplomatic Courier, starring Tyrone Power. She thought that if I went to Black Fox, I would not only learn how to dance, play bridge and play the piano, but also how to be at ease with girls and learn everything there is to know about sex. So, off I went to Hollywood. Something else my mother didn't know was that almost every boy who lived at Black Fox came from a broken home. Mostly they were sons of parents who wanted to get rid of their kids. Bleak, huh? Bleak. Evening, John.
Evening.
What you got for us?
Well, I had a whole sort of range of things, but now I'm mostly thinking about Gene Wilder's relationship with his mother and what that must have done to him, and how he ended up as an adult and what his relationships were like when he grew up. Because that all sounds, if that's, you know, if we're not saying that's ghostwritten, then those are the things that he wanted to tell the world about his mother, and it's all quite strange.
We're only 12 pages in, and boy, oh boy, haven't we learnt a lot about the screwy relationship with his mum. I didn't know that people actually did wash out, you know, people's mouths with bars of soap. Catherine's telling me it happened to her with actual bars of soap.
I remember my father trying to do it to my brother, but I think he basically chickened out. Actually, no, if I remember rightly, my mother screamed so much that he stopped. But my father did try to do it once. But But it's the fascinating thing is this whole bit about actually almost the first thing he tells you about his mother is that he was told that he had the power of life and death.
Oh, God, Kath, you missed this bit. You were out. She's got heart problems, his mother, and he's a kid, and the fat heart cardiologist, he calls him that, pulled him to one side and said, don't get angry with your mum. You could kill her. Imagine saying that to a child. You've got the power to kill your mother.
And then, but the other interesting thing is that bit is sandwiched in between two really quite sexual passages in the book. There's that first sort of whole bit of sort of dream sequence thing at the start, and then there's then we go almost straight into how we learn about sex at a camp. There's a very strange sort of Freudial, Oedipal sort of.
Oh, I think so. And this is a gentleman. From what little I know about him, every word in this book is his. But went through many years of therapy, as was almost fashionable to a certain extent in Hollywood in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. I think he's kind of waving the red flag here, saying, my mum screwed me up, guys. My mum screwed me up. I'm screwed up by my mother.
But then it also raises the whole question of that very fact that he went through therapy. Is that book actually an outcome of the therapy rather than actually an outcome of his own thoughts about what went on in his life?
Because to shove a bar of soap in a kid's mouth is abuse.
Yeah.
And then she does what abusers quite often do. Abusers tend to have two kind of things they do afterwards. They're either completely dismissive of the person they've just abused, or they're begging forgiveness. I'm sorry. You hear it a lot in spousal abuse, which is why quite often partners who are abused by their husbands or wives stay with them. Darling, I'm so sorry. I will never do it again. This isn't me. I'm just having a bad day, and I'll never do it again. And obviously, the instance with Jean's mum, she did it all throughout his childhood.
Yeah, and then you've got that overlaid with the fact that actually he knows that she's going to die, and actually he could cause that death if he wasn't careful. So of course you're going to forgive. And what else of choice has the child got but to forgive?
I carried around, John, for a long. My mother, I don't know how regular you listen. My mum's very ill. She's got MS, and and I carried around for a long time. I didn't think that I'd caused her MS, but I did think that I'd triggered it, because just before she started getting a bit poorly, and we thought there was something a bit weird, I had a massive row with her. And I'll tell you why, and this is why I'm a bit funny around sex, because she found out that instead of staying at a mate's house overnight, I was actually staying with my girlfriend, who she didn't like. And, the night I lost my virginity, and came back and had this massive row with her, a huge row, said terrible things to her. And then shortly after that, she started to display what became the early symptoms of MS. And for a long time, because it can be caught, MS can be made worse by stress. For a long time, I kind of thought maybe I brought it on years before it was meant to come on. I don't know. I'm saying it loud. I still don't know, really. I probably didn't, but
I think we all do that to ourselves. I have a similar thing where I for most of my childhood I was in a wheelchair, and a lot of the time my mother used to carry me around when I was much too old to be carried around, and then she got a really bad back, and her spine crumbled away in later life, and she's sort of in a wheelchair herself now. And I spent a lot of time thinking, well, actually, you're in a wheelchair now. She actually ended up in the same initially. She ended up in the same wheelchair that I used to use, and you end up thinking, well, that's I caused that. That's clearly, that's my penance, as it were, for things that I did, but. Ultimately, I guess what we all have to do is to rationalise some of that stuff away. Otherwise, isn't
that incredible? And yet, of course, I don't know if you're a parent, John, but I would jump in front of a bus for my boys. We as parents, we would do. Most parents, obviously there are exceptions. Most parents would do anything, detrimental to themselves to improve their kids' lives.
Yeah, and my mother's exactly the same now. She would still do anything. She doesn't have any of those thoughts. Those thoughts have never, they've never come out of her mouth. That's all stuff that my own head created.
Yeah.
But we tend to do that to ourselves.
Yeah, you're right. My mother has never said, "Oh, I remember that big argument," and that's when Of course, she's never said it because she's never made that connection because it was just bad luck and she was turning 40, and it kind of can come on at 40. And you're right. It's all our heads, my head, your head, that have constructed these things.
Yeah, our brains have a great ability to take sort of completely abstract sort of memories or facts or ideas, and either at the time or sometimes years later start to draw all sorts of connections that, frankly, did not exist at the time. Are not real connections. But we're looking for an answer. We're looking for a narrative. It's the same as seeing faces in the clouds. That actually, we're trying to make a story out of something that wasn't really a story in the first place. But we're seeking some sort of answer for ourselves. In my case, I think I want to reason why my mum became so ill, why a good person became so ill. Well, actually, here you go. If you're naturally inclined, as I am, and as I think you are, to be quite negative about yourself. Well, okay, so I'm looking for a reason as to why my mother's so ill. Oh, look, here's a nice, easy reason. It's clearly your fault because she had to carry you around. And you give yourself an answer, you give yourself a reason, and you build a narrative around it. And it's not real. It's not true.
Honestly, this I've never heard anyone express that so beautifully as you've just done. Absolutely, what you have said is me. Absolutely spot on. That's incredible. Thank you for that, John. That's incredible.
That's all right. But we are in fact the same age, and I think born in the same month.
We're old.
We have things in common.
How are you looking, John? Because I'm really starting to think now. I'm starting to look old.
Oh yes. I had the misfortune of appearing in the local paper this week, and not for anything bad.
Anyway, but, I hope you did a glum face. I hope you did one of those glum faces pointing down to a dog poo or something.
No, I for my work, I work in schools, and there was an article about the school, but they used a rather old stock photo, so it was quite nice in one sense because it makes me look much younger than I am. But the difficulty is you look at that and you go, oh dear, I don't look like that anymore, and that was only 3 years ago.
All the photos all the photos on my website are about 5-6 years old, and I in my head I still look like that guy. I don't look anything like that guy in real life.
Well, it's the same as I've spent most of my life telling people that I'm blonde, and there is no way that my hair is blonde. I think it may have been blonde when I was about 3, but my concept, I'm still surprised. I'm surprised when I hear my own voice play back to me, and I'm surprised when I look in the mirror, because the person I see in the mirror and the voice I hear if you play it back to me is not the one that I conceive myself to be at all. There's a complete mismatch. But I don't think that's particularly unusual either. I think that most people's self-image and their actual self are quite different.
Here's the thing: I bought my boys a cassette recorder. You know those old rectangular cassette recorders? Because I like them to know about records and tapes and things. Yeah. And so we bought a cassette recorder and recorded their voices and them talking, and I played it back and I said, "Do you think that sounds like you?" And they went, "Well, yeah, of course it does." I'm thinking, well, hang on, that's not how it's supposed to go. They're supposed...
No.
But then, of course, then it dawned on me. Everything they do is filmed. Ever since they've been born, I've got video cameras on my phone. Everything. They've heard their voices back millions of times. Whereas when we were kids in the 70s, to get a tape recorder, it was a real novelty. You hear yourself back, and it was like, God, but they hear themselves back all the time. It's not a novelty for them.
And they see themselves all the time. I remember the first time I taking a video camera on holiday for the first time with some friends and actually seeing myself on video for the first time. That was an amazing...
You look awkward, and I always look awkward and gangly, and my arms are too long and all of that stuff.
Yeah, but the children growing up now, that's all they've ever seen. They see themselves constantly. That's a very different. That's a really interesting thought, because that must be such a different experience, and that must really totally influence your self-esteem and your self-reflection if you're always seeing that. That's a really interesting thought of what the impact of that is.
John, I've really enjoyed your call. Thank you so much.
That's all right. No, nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too, mate. Thank you very much indeed. 0344 499 1000. Mark, stick around if you want. I will come to you, I promise. But I'm keen to find out more about this book. So he's just going to the military academy. On the first night at Black Fox, I was assigned to a room on the second floor of the dormitory. When I walked in, I was greeted by a short, tough-looking boy with acne all over his face. "Hi, I'm Jonesy," he said. "We're going to be roommates for a long time, so I'm taking this bed and you take that one." When I got into my brand new pyjamas that first night, Jonesy started smiling at me and said, "Oh, God, this has taken a very, very dark twist." Let me speak to Mark first, and then we'll go. This is taking a very, very... Mark!
Hello, Ian.
Hello, Mark. You're right. We'll do, it's going to take a very, very dark twist, and we'll take a dark twist after midnight, okay? It's straight in there, page 13. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It feels a bit trivial what I'm about to say.
No, beautiful. Trivial is wonderful. We love it.
All right, then. Danny Kendall's demise.
Yeah, here we go. Fantastic. Yes, go on.
Right, I'm pretty sure it was in the back of Mr. Bronson's car. Remember Mr. Bronson with a tash who bullied him mercilessly?
Yes, he wore a wig, didn't he? And when he went swimming, he took the wig off and the kid stole the wig.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he sort of, not on purpose, but his demise was in the back of Mr. Bronson's car.
I think it was. What was he doing in the back of the car?
I don't know. Did he have a drug overdose or something like that?
No, I think, didn't he have like a heart condition or something? I thought it was natural causes.
Yeah, he had a heart condition, yeah.
And
I don't know how he actually died, but I'm sure he triggered it so it'd be in the back of Mr. Bronson's car. And Mr. Bronson, by the way, was in the first Star Wars film and Indiana Jones, the first Indiana Jones film.
Really?
Yep.
You don't see many of the Grange Hill people anymore, do you?
Well, funny you should say that, Ian, because a year after about a year after he was in it, I went into McDonald's in Harlesden after school, and who was working behind the counter? Gripper Stepson.
Was he really?
And I'm sure I said a hamburger, and he misheard me. He goes, "You say cheeseburger?" And I just looked at him and said, "Yes."
Wow, you were terrified by Gripper Stepson working in McDonald's.
Yes, even though I didn't want cheese on my burger, I said it because it was Gripper.
Flippin' heck. Well,
and also, I think everyone had a teacher like Mr. Bronson, and also a PE teacher like Bullet Baxter.
Bullet Baxter, yeah, we did have one like Bullet Baxter. Mr. Wakeford, a man who was past his prime, but was I believe the description barrel chested would describe him perfectly. He didn't like me from lesson 1. I remember this, lesson 1. I went to a grammar school, so we still had the 11+. And the first day at school, you'd go into like French, and it would just be, so what is French about, and what is history about? And we go for the first games lesson. We're all sat in the change room. I don't know any of the people I'm with, and he goes, "Right, so what can you learn from sports?" You boy, points to, it's good for your health. Yeah, you boy, teamwork. And he went on to about 8 or 9, and I was about the 10th boy, and he picked me. I went, teamwork? He went, "We've already had that. Pick another." And from that day on, that man made my life a misery. An absolute misery.
I must admit, my PE teacher hated me. My dad was going to go up and sort him out, but he detested me for some reason. I don't know why.
It's funny, isn't it? Isn't it funny? And another teacher who was a science teacher. I won't go into any more detail because he was horrible. And I was getting bullied quite badly in the second year by some people that were in his class. And so my parents reported it. And he said, he was quite senior in the school. He said, "I'll sort it out." So he called me into his office one day. And the other lads that were bullying me were there. And he said, "Are these the boys that are bullying you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Right, well, they told me that they haven't been bullying you, and they're really good students of mine, so I don't believe you. So why are you lying about these boys?" And I'm there, I'm 11 going, And he humiliated me. And of course, they carried on bullying me. And then he carried on bullying me. This teacher, this horrible... He was also in charge of cross-country, and he'd make me run cross-country. Oh, horrible man.
Just by having them in the same room, he's given them carte blanche to carry on bullying you, really, hasn't he? He said, go on, lads, carry on bullying him.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. Some teachers are right old. I'm so lucky that the teachers my boys have got at the moment are absolutely delightful, but geez, I mean, some of them, it doesn't bear thinking about.
I think it's our day though, because I mean, my son's 6, and his teachers, you couldn't meet a better bunch. Do you know what I mean? But it's just, I think it was our age group sort of thing, you know.
Mark, thank you for that. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, mate.
Cheers, Ian. Bye.
Cheers, my dears. Right. We'll carry on reading the Gene Wilder book. I warn you, I've not read this book before. Okay, I've just glimpsed at the next paragraph. It gets quite grim. And bearing in mind that in the first 12 pages, we've learnt about how he was told as a child that he could kill his mum if he got angry with her. And she used to abuse him by cleaning his mouth out with soap and then begging for forgiveness. It gets even darker than that. So, some of you may want to switch off at midnight. Because, I don't know, you might find it triggering or you might find it up. I've literally just glanced at the paragraph and I have a vague idea of where it's going to go. So, it's up to you if you want to stick around or not. You can still call in. There's another hour of this to go. 0344 499 1000. We haven't got any phone calls lined up at the moment, but when the calls come up on the screen and I find an appropriate break in the book, I will I'll stop and I will address the calls. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. We're reading Kiss Me Like a Stranger, Gene Wilder's autobiography, and you're listening to Talk Radio.
Late night, Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Someone on Twitter has said, why would you not reply to anyone? I'm assuming because if you're still listening, it does get thoroughly unpleasant, this next bit, and some of you might find this upsetting. I've not read it, I've just... what a horrible paragraph. I've just glimpsed at it. 0344 499 1000. I'll keep reading. No one may call in which case we get an hour of the book. People may call in, and when I come to an appropriate break, if I see them on the switchboard, which I will because it's right in front of me, I'll put them on and we'll have a chat. You can call in about the book. You can call in about anything else you want. On my first night at Black Fox, I was assigned... Reading Gene Wilder's autobiography, if you just tuned in. On my first night at Black Fox, I was assigned to a room on the second floor of the dormitory. When I walked in, I was greeted by a short, tough-looking boy with acne all over his face. "Hi, I'm Jonesy," he said. "We're going to be roommates for a long time, so I'm taking this bed and you take that one." When I got into my brand new pyjamas that first night, Jonesy started smiling at me and said, "Let me cornhole ya." I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. Then he told me to just lie down on my bed, face down. He got on top of me and put his penis between my thighs and started pumping away until he had an orgasm. His jizz went onto my new pyjamas, not into me. After he saw how upset I was, he never tried to do that again. He just jerked off in the closet. I told you. And then it goes on and that's that. Isn't that incredible? How honest and how open. Wow. Gene Wilder. Incredible. This was 1946. When word got out that I was Jewish, some of the bigger boys started coming into my room and pounding me on the chest and on my arms. They didn't hit me in the face, and I was glad of that, but I couldn't understand why they wanted to beat me up. They never said why. One tall jerk named Macintosh barged into my room one day and started dancing around me like an Indian in the movies circling a covered wagon. And he kept singing, "We want the country, we want the country." It scared me, but he didn't hit me, so I was okay. I remembered seeing some movie about initiation tests when you got into a fraternity, so I figured it was some kind of tradition to beat up the newest cadets. Then I found out that I was the only Jewish boy at Black Fox, so I finally understood the reason. But it still didn't make any sense. I went to the sergeant's room at the end of the hall. He was a real sergeant who took the job at Black Fox when he retired from the army. I told him about all the beatings and asked him what I should do. You want them to stop beating you up? Yes, sir. The next time one of them comes into your room, pick up a chair and smash it over his head. But I can't do that. What if I killed him? You asked me what to do. I told you. I never went to him for help again. There were several Mexican boys at Black Fox who came from very wealthy families. In those days, bubblegum was very hard to come by, but the Mexican boys always seemed to have some. Instead of charging the other boys 1 penny, which was the market price for one of those pink bubblegum squares, they would charge $1. The tallest Mexican boy kept trying to sell me bubblegum, and I kept telling him that I didn't have that kind of extra money. Then he would say, I give you a bubblegum if you jerk me off. I would laugh and pretend that he was making a joke, but I knew that he wasn't joking. On Fridays, we always had a dress parade, which meant tie, jacket, hat and well-shined shoes. We marched on the Black Fox drill field, which bordered on Melrose Avenue and Wilcox. People in the neighbourhood would stand along the sidewalk each Friday afternoon to watch all the cute young cadets go through their routines. As we were marching, one flamboyant, very likeable young boy named Ronnie, who had a shock of bright red hair, kept telling me that he was going to be a big star one day. I would say that I was studying acting with Herman Gottlieb, who was a great teacher in Milwaukee. Ronnie would just answer, You'll never make it, Silberman. I'll bet you anything you want that I'll be famous before you are. People who live in Hollywood are different from other people. On Thursday afternoons, I went to my piano lesson. The teacher was a nice enough man, but not a very good teacher. He assigned me just one song called, ironically, Nobody Knows the Troubles I've Seen. I don't remember if I ever told him about the troubles I was having with the other boys. I don't think so. And I know he wasn't that good a teacher to have purposely assigned that song to me as a way of using my unhappiness to help me play it better. I wrote to my father and told him about all of this stuff, but he never showed any of those letters to my mother. I suppose for the same reason that I didn't write to her about it. At Thanksgiving, I called my father and asked if I could come home for Christmas vacation. He said yes. When it came time to leave, for some reason I can't explain, I needed to say goodbye to Jonesy. My bags were packed and the bus was waiting downstairs, but I searched all over the floor for him. When I finally found him, he shook my hand and said, So long, pal. Jonesy and I were never friends, and he was a jerk, but he never beat me up, and he had acne. I don't know why I needed to say goodbye to him. I'm sure it wasn't because he cornholed me. I do remember that on one occasion he shared a box of candy with me that his aunt had sent him. Maybe it was because someone told him that chocolate wasn't good for acne. My father and Corinne picked me up at the airport in Chicago, and we drove back to Milwaukee. I had on my blue, sort of itchy dress uniform, but I wanted to be wearing it when I walked into the house and saw my mother again. She was waiting in our living room. When I walked in, she hugged and kissed me. Then she asked me to play something for her on the piano. Oh, God, I didn't think it would come that soon. I wanted to put it off. I made up some kind of flimsy excuse about not having practice for several weeks, but she wanted to hear me play just a little bit. So I sat down at the piano and played Nobody Knows the Troubles I've Seen, and I played it terribly with 100 mistakes. She got up and went into her bedroom. I began to cry. My dad said maybe I should change my clothes and get ready for dinner. I took off my shirt and went into her bedroom to explain how I only had one lesson a week and how little time there was for me to practice, when she suddenly gasped. She was staring at my body. There were black and blue bruises on my chest and arms. My dad finally told her some of the troubles I'd described in my letters. She started crying and begging me to forgive her, until I finally went into her arms and she kissed my tears and kept repeating, I'm sorry, honey, please forgive me, I was wrong, can you ever forgive me? I never went back to Black Fox. When I was 15, I went to a downtown movie theatre to see Great Expectations, but before the movie started, they showed a short subject called Vincent van Gogh. I had no idea who Vincent van Gogh was. I'd never even heard of him. 23 of his oil paintings flooded the screen, one after the other in full colour. I don't know why they call it dumbfounded. I think they should call it dumb-losted, because after seeing the paintings, I was lost. When I walked out of the movie theatre, I started thinking about my second-grade teacher, Miss Bernard, who used to put up paintings from all of the other boys and girls in my class on the classroom walls, paintings that she considered worthy, but she never put up one of mine. She never told me why or gave me an encouraging word, but I got the message. You're no good at art, Jerry. The following Sunday, I took an early train to Chicago to see the Van Gogh exhibition at the Chicago Art Institute. I could only stay for an hour because I had tickets for the 2:00 matinee to see Judith Anderson in Medea. My critical judgment wasn't fine-tuned yet. I thought the play was just okay. Then I walked to a theatre about half a mile away to see the 5:00 showing of Laurence Olivier's film version of Hamlet. That was okay too. Hamlet let out at 8 p.m, so I ran as fast as I could. So I ran so fast as I could eat my hot dog to see the 8:30 p.m. stage performance of A Streetcar Named Desire, starring Uta Hagen and Anthony Quinn. That was more than okay. I think what I did was dumb, crowding all those great things into one day. But Milwaukee was a big, small town in those days, and it would never have had a Van Gogh exhibit or Medea, am I saying that right? Medea, or Streetcar Named Desire with Uta Hagen. Today, perhaps, but not in 1948. My mother had wanted to be a pianist before she got married. When I told her about the Van Gogh exhibit and how much I loved him, she gave me a little money to buy some paints. I took the bus to an art supply shop downtown and bought 8 tubes of oil paint and 2 frames of stretched canvas, 18 by 24 inches apiece. The owner of the store helped me pick out a couple of brushes and advised me to take a small bottle of linseed oil. I also bought a print of a Van Gogh painting for $3.50. It was called Lady in a Cornfield. When I got home, I set up shop in our basement, mounted the Van Gogh print on a chair, and painted Lady in a Cornfield. My mother liked it so much that she had it framed and hung it on our living room wall next to her piano. I've been painting ever since. So, you didn't win, Miss Bernard. You didn't win. My first play. When I was still 15, I auditioned for the Milwaukee Players, which was a very good community theatre that put on big productions of classics and also gave lessons in makeup. I passed my audition, and the first play I acted in front of a paying audience, was Romeo and Juliet. I played Balthazar, Romeo's manservant, and I had only 2 lines. But I also had a fencing scene, which I loved. It wasn't real fencing, of course. It was just sort of try to make it look real fencing. My next part was the messenger in Much Ado About Nothing. One evening, while we were in production, I got to the theatre early and had just started putting on my makeup when one of the male dancers came in, very bouncy and cheerful. He'd always been very friendly, but when he saw that we were alone, he started behaving strangely. I had never met a homosexual before. I'd only heard Corinne talk about what were then called fairies, but this handsome dancer, who must have been at least 10 years older than I was, started chasing me around the children's classroom that we used as a makeup room. I dodged in and out of the rows of little desks, trying my best to make the dancer believe that I believed that he was just playing a game. Just as I was getting frightened, 2 other actors came in, said hi, and started putting on their makeup. I sat down at my desk and started putting makeup on again. I didn't look at the dancer until he knelt down next to me. "You know I was just joking around, don't you?" he whispered. "Of course. Are you kidding?" I wish I'd acted in Much Ado About Nothing as well as I did for the dancer. End of chapter. Wow. Just let all of that sink in. That's some heavy shiz, isn't it? No one's calling in. That means one of 2 things, as far as I can tell. you've all switched off, which is possible, which is absolutely possible, or you're all engrossed in this book. You can call him 0344 499 1000. 0344 499 1000. You can call in to talk about the book. You can call in to talk about, you know the drill. You can call in about anything you want. You can phone in and tell me that this is a load of rubbish if you want. You'd be more than welcome. Otherwise, if no one calls in, there's only another 45 minutes. I'll carry on reading the book. I will take no calls as a tacit thumbs up that you're okay with me doing this. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Late Nights with Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
Uncut after-hours conversation for the up-all-night generation. Late Night Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
We have no calls, so we continue. I take that as a sign of you've either all switched off or you're all digging the book. Gene Wilder's autobiography, Kiss Me Like a Stranger. I think I bought this about 2 or 3 weeks before he passed away. I think a penny on Amazon. They say a penny. It's £2.80 postage. So but I had no idea. I've not read it. This has been sitting on my bookshelf for months, and I just grabbed it as I was coming in tonight. Just grabbed it and thought, oh, we'll have that. Don't know what, and I was going to read it at home, but it's just been one of those shows. If you want to call in and talk about the book, or say the book is rubbish, or say what I'm doing is rubbish, or talk about anything, you're very welcome. 0344 499 1000. Otherwise, I'll just crack on reading. Chapter 3. Take Me. When Corinne was 20, she went to act. This is his sister, at the Reginald Goode Summer Theatre near. Now, I never know how to say this place. I think it's Poughkeepsie. 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 P-O-U-G-H. Catherine is typing it phonetically on my screen. Just say it. Go on. What is it?
It's Poughkeepsie.
Is it Poughkeepsie? Is it really? Did not know that. Okay, Poughkeepsie. P-O-U-G-H-K-E-E-P-S-I-E. I'll get it wrong again. But when Corinne was 20, she went to act at the Reginald Goode Summer Theatre near Poughkeepsie, New York. You had to pay $90 a week for food and lodgings. In return, you got the privilege of acting with the famous 68-year-old Australian actor Reginald Goode in front of a real summer stock audience 6 nights a week. A call came to our house in Milwaukee. Mr. Goode suddenly discovered that he was one man short for his acting company. I assumed that some guy didn't want to pay the $90. Corinne told Mr. Goode that her brother was an actor, and he told her to get me to Poughkeepsie immediately. I had just turned 16. I was thrilled, of course, but my father wasn't, unless they waived the $90 a week fee they charged for the privilege of acting with Mr. Goode. After a lot of bluster, Mr. Goode agreed. I was on the train the next day. The Playhouse was a beautiful old barn converted into a theatre. It held about 500 or 600 people. All of the actors, except me, slept and ate in Reginald Goode's private house across the huge lawn that separated the house from the theatre. I was assigned to a unique bedroom inside the theatre, just off stage left. The bedroom was about as big as a walk-in closet. When I went to bed that first night, it was a little frightening. It was so dark when I shut off. Sorry, I'm just trying to do something on the screen there. It was so dark when I shut off the one light bulb, and there were strange sounds all through the night. The old wooden barn was dancing with the wind. As I lay in bed, trying to fall asleep, I saw a name carved into the wall beside me, just above my head. K.T. Stevens. I knew that name. I'd read about her. She was a famous actress from 15 or 20 years ago, and she must have slept in this same bedroom, probably in this same bed, and carved her name into the wall next to me, so that years later other actors would remember her. I ran my fingers over her carved name and whispered, "Good night, Katie," then turned off my light bulb and fell asleep. The first play I acted in at the Playhouse was The Late Christopher Bean by Sidney Howard. I think I got more laughs than Mr. Goode had expected. When the two of us were alone on stage and the audience started laughing at something I did or said, he would lean down and whisper, "Wait for it, wait for it." The play was so successful that he held it over for another week. Or else he had to hold it over because he didn't have the next show ready, which was probably more likely. The next play was The Cat and the Canary. Henry Hull had played the lead on Broadway. Bob Hope played it in the movie. Now I was playing the same part. But no one told me that old Mr. Good was married to this gorgeous 23-year-old red-haired actress who was going to play my romantic interest. Her name was Rita. She explained to me privately that when we had our kissing scene, it shouldn't be a real kiss, which might throw both of us off. It should just look like a real kiss by putting our lips on the side of the other person's mouth, just close enough so that it looked real. I thought, well, that must be how real actors do it. Mr. Good worked in a bizarre way. After the evening performances, we all made sandwiches from a big roast ham that was set out each evening on the kitchen table. We drank milk or soda, no alcohol, and then we rehearsed most of the night, until just before the sun came up. That's the way Mr. Good wanted it. I loved it. For me, it was very romantic. For Rita, too. Forget that on-the-side-of-the-mouth business. By the fourth day of rehearsal, she started kissing for real. Remember Seema Clark, the young Rita Hayworth with the fake Angora sweater who made me feel like a disgrace to God and my mother for trying to touch about half an inch of her breast? Because of her, I still hadn't tried to touch a girl's breast. Kiss a lot, yes, but breasts were too dangerous. Of course, if Seema Clark had liked what I was doing and made some lovely sounds of encouragement, who knows? We rehearsed The Cat and the Canary for 5 nights, and then on the 6th night, before dress rehearsal and after strong signals from Rita, she and I drifted off towards the riverbank. We knew there would be a long break while they were changing the sets, so we lay down on the grass near a little brook and kissed and kissed. No breasts, no penis. While we were lying there, she said, "Take me." "Take you where?" I answered. I knew very well what she meant. I wasn't that dumb, but I wasn't prepared for the big time yet. I think that if Rita had been more aggressive on that particular night, my life would have taken a very different path. But she was careful where she touched me. Later, after rehearsing till 5 a.m., I had just gotten into bed when I heard a knock at my door. "It's me," Rita whispered. I opened the door, and there she was, in her nightgown, looking as beautiful as a fantasy. She got into bed with me, and we started kissing. After about 4 minutes, she said, "What do you think would happen if I touched you here?" pointing to the bulge underneath my pyjamas. Before I could answer, we both heard Reginald Good calling out from somewhere on the lawn near my bedroom door. "Rita!" He wasn't hollering and he wasn't whispering. It sounded more like a father calling out to his daughter who had stayed out too late one night. But now it was time for her to come home. I felt that he didn't know for sure if she was actually with me, but that he assumed she was. Rita got under the covers and wiggled down towards the bottom of the bed, so that if Mr. Good did burst in, he wouldn't see her. I was scared to death. I do mean death. I imagined a shotgun. "Rita?" he called again. But he didn't knock on my door, which I was terrified he was going to do. He listened for another minute or 90 seconds. While I held my breath, I could hear him breathing. He was that close. And then he walked away. After 3 or 4 minutes, Rita jumped out of bed, took a quick peek outside, and then ran across the lawn to the big house just as the sun was coming up. Mr. Good never brought up this incident to me. Margie interrupted. She rarely did, but we were now in our 2nd year together, and I was used to it. "Now, wait a minute, Mr. Wilder." She started using that little twist on Mr. to emphasise whatever comic irony she was about to emphasise with me. "Did you fondle her breasts?" "No." "Did she ever suck you?" "No." "Did you ever F her?" "No." "Did you want to?" "Yes." "Why didn't you?" "I don't have a reason that makes sense." "Then give me a reason that doesn't make sense." I thought it was wrong. I don't mean for anyone else, just me. I think I might have enjoyed it too much. Why would it be wrong if you enjoyed it too much? I lay motionless for almost a minute, searching for the answer. But I didn't know the answer. Margie wrote something in her pad. Not the end of the chapter, but it's a good place to pause. Imagine writing a book so honest. You know, I've been toying with the idea of writing a book, not an autobiography, but a book about my TV stuff. And at the moment, I'm erring on the side of that. I don't think I will. But I can't imagine being that honest in the book. It's incredible. We've got a couple of calls. Waj.
Yes, hello, Iain Lee. Long time no hear.
Is that so?
It is, yeah. I used to listen to you on LBC.
Hey, flipping it, man. That was years ago.
Years ago, I know, yeah. Sorry about it.
What's been happening in the last 10 years?
I've been switching on and off.
Yeah, well, that would make sense.
Yeah, and I've been trying to look for you as well.
Waj, I've been hiding from you. I've been on witness protection. I didn't want Waj. I said I don't want Waj to find me. Put me on some obscure radio stations where no one can hear me, and they did.
I heard you changed a couple of radio stations as well.
I've been in 2 or 3 radio stations since you last heard me.
Yeah. All right.
How's life been, Waj?
Enjoying radio then? Pardon?
How's life been for you in the last 10 years?
Yeah, it's all good. I've been married 4 years now.
Hey, congratulations. You got any kids?
Yeah, thanks. Not yet.
Do you want kids?
Having a bit of fun. I do, yeah.
Having a bit of fun. Well, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, though you still have fun when you've got kids, but it's a completely different, much more expensive kind of fun.
They keep you awake all night, don't they?
Mate, that ain't even the half of it. Yes, they keep you awake all night, and it's relentless. But it's it's the best. They're the best people in the world.
They are, yeah.
So how did you find? How did you? Yeah, I'm married. I've got 2 little boys who are 7 and 5.
Oh, that's good.
But how did you find this? How did you find this, Waj? Have you just discovered it tonight?
No, I discovered it the first time I tweeted you. Don't know if you remembered about 2 weeks ago.
Yes, I do remember. Yes, I do remember, mate. Yeah.
That's when I found it.
Oh well, wicked. I'm really pleased you've found it. Obviously, I was on strike last week, and this week
I heard about that.
Is an odd.
Mike Mendoza with Mike Mendoza as well.
Yeah, it's sad what happened to Mike Mendoza, isn't it?
I know, he's on TV now, isn't he?
Unfortunately for TV. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Mike Mendoza's fine.
Yeah, I spoke to James a couple of days ago as well.
James, wow. I know, I think it's really good what Talk Radio are doing for elderly radio presenters like James, giving them an opportunity to earn a few pennies, and
No, I don't think James will ever retire.
No. Well, he can't. He's in so much debt. He can't afford to.
Is he? All right.
Yeah.
You should give him a loan.
Yeah. Well, maybe you should, Waj. Maybe you should.
Yeah.
Well, Waj,
it's nice hearing you. I listen to you every day now.
Nice one, man. And you don't forget you can download the podcast and tell your friends to listen. We need as many people listening as we can.
Yeah, you can pay me a bit for that as well. Well, advertisement.
Thank you very much, Waj. Well, it's more than the station's doing at the moment. Thank you, mate. Dennis.
Good evening, Ian.
Good evening, Dennis.
Now, the town you were looking for was Poughkeepsie.
Oh, there, Catherine. Does everyone know how to say Poughkeepsie, then, apart from me?
You've seen enough films with it in, yes.
I've read it in books. My favourite place to pronounce is Schenectady. Schenectady.
Schenectady.
Is it not Schenectady?
It's Schenectady.
Is it? Oh, well, in that case, I've been pronouncing it wrong. Schenectady.
Yeah.
Oh well.
You'll get there.
Yeah, one day, Dennis.
Well, that's all right. It's lovely reading. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed your reading that book.
It's a good book, isn't it? It's a bit grim. I didn't realise it was going to be so grim.
Well, I might go out and buy it.
Well, you should do it. It's a cracking little read. I'm going to carry on reading a bit more till the end of the show, I think.
Right. Well, I'll sit and listen. And I shan't be in bed till 2 o'clock, so...
Thank you, Dennis. Well, you have a good night, fella. We'll carry on in a bit. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number if you want to give us a call. Late Nights with Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
Late Night Iain Lee.
On air and off the leash.
On Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
We're still on the same chapter. No time for comedy is the paragraph heading. When the season at the Reginald Good Theatre ended, Corinne and I went to New York and saw Death of a Salesman starring Lee J. Cobb and Mildred Dunnock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Even after I'd started studying acting with Mr. Gottlieb, I didn't know that acting could be this real. It was as if what I was watching was actually happening. Until that night, I had thought often about being a comedian, mostly because I'd seen Danny Kaye in Up in Arms and then Jerry Lewis in television and then, for me, the king of them all, Sid Caesar on Your Show of Shows. But after seeing Death of a Salesman, I had no more thoughts of becoming a comedian. I wanted to be an actor. Perhaps a comic actor, but an actor, not a comedian. I went back to Milwaukee and made a 1-hour adaptation of Death of a Salesman. I played Lee J. Cobb's part, of course, a 16-year-old Willie Loman. And along with 2 of my acting friends from school, we performed at churches and women's clubs all over Milwaukee, and then in front of 2,000 students at my high school. I also began reading An Actor Prepares by Konstantin Stanislavski. One afternoon, while we were performing at some women's club, I came to the scene where Willie Loman is trying to plant seeds in his backyard at night. I was very relaxed. I don't think there was any tension in my mind or body. There was no actual earth, of course, only a wooden floor, but when I started planting, me, as Willie Loman, carrots, 1/4 inch apart, suddenly I was in a backyard, not an auditorium, planting seeds. I knew I wasn't crazy. I heard everything that I was saying and what the other actors were saying. I knew I was acting in a play, but I also knew that I wasn't acting. Corinne had gone to the University of Iowa during my high school years. It was reputed to have one of the 5 best theatre departments in the country. I drove from Milwaukee to visit Corinne in Iowa City several times. We'd go to a football game together, and then I'd see her in one of the university productions. When I was 17, I saw her play the part of Gwendolyn in The Importance of Being Earnest. After the show, I met her stage director, whom I liked very much. He looked at me for a second and then said, "When are we going to get this fella?" Corinne was invited to a party that someone was giving after the show. She told the host she would like to bring her kid brother along. We walked into an old Victorian house, stuffed with college students. There were all kinds of things to eat and drink. Corinne introduced me to her roommate, Mary Jo, who had the most original lips I'd ever seen, except for perhaps for those of French actress Jean Moreau, whom I'd seen in a movie called The Lovers. She and Moreau must have traded lip secrets. I wish that Mary Jo was going to my high school so that I could date her, but since she was a college student and I was what my father would have called a high school pisher, I honestly didn't think she would give me the time of day after we were introduced. I wasn't particularly handsome, and I certainly wasn't very experienced, especially when it came to the opposite sex. But to my surprise, Mary Jo stayed with me during the whole party. We sat down on a small sofa and ate hors d'oeuvres and watched everyone else in the room either kissing or drinking beer or both. I don't know if I kissed Mary Jo first or if she kissed me. Maybe it was both at the same time. But we started kissing. And we kept on kissing. I don't remember anything we said to each other. I just remember the kissing and the look in her eyes where a small beam of light was reflected from a street lamp. When the party broke up, we said goodbye. I slept in my used car that night and drove back to Milwaukee the next morning. The memory of Mary Jo's eyes stayed in my dreams for a long time. As a high school graduation present, my mother and father let me go to New York to see plays, provided I stayed at an inexpensive hotel. The old Taft Hotel on 50th and 6th Avenue fit the bill. I saw Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, starring Carol Channing. During her performance, I was particularly curious how she could keep using her throat to make the guttural sounds she used in her talking and singing without going hoarse. After the show, I stood at the stage door with a few other people, waiting for her to come out. When she did, she signed some autographs and then came up to me, expecting me to give her a programme to sign. I don't know where I got the nerve to say it. "Miss Channing, does it hurt your throat when you talk and sing in that special way you do?" She looked at me as if I was some kind of country bumpkin and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She gave me an autograph. I thanked her, and she left. One evening, instead of seeing a play, I went to the Paris movie theatre and saw Charlie Chaplin in City Lights. More than any other movie I'd ever seen, City Lights made the biggest impression on me as an actor. It was funny, then sad, then both at the same time. That fall, I went straight off to the University of Iowa, acting in the first production of the year, The Winslow Boy, directed by Corinne's director, whom I liked so much and who had said, "When are we going to get this fella?" The end of the chapter. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Good time to take a break, I think.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Late night, Iain Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Well, tonight we're, it's been a strange week, hasn't it? Been a really strange week of shows. I don't think Monday and Tuesday were that good, actually. And then Wednesday and Thursday were like classic late 90s, late night phone-in shows. And tonight I'm reading you Gene Wilder's Kiss Me Like a Stranger. It's charming and horrific in equal measures. We don't, as adults, we don't read to each other, do we? And I tell you what, because I've always kind of poo-pooed audiobooks, but the last couple of weeks I've listened to the Alan Partridge Nomad, Johnny Marr autobiography. I started that gentleman, the American gentleman, Doug Stanhope. I didn't like it. I didn't like his tone, so I stopped. And of course I read to my boys, and the boys that we've kind of stepped up a gear in the books that I'm reading at bedtime. And instead of reading kind of, kids' books, I bought them for Christmas, the Complete Secret Seven. And they're loving it. And I used to have all the Secret Seven books, and I'm reading them and remembering them as I'm reading them. And they're loving it. It's the joy of having a 7 and a 5-year-old tucked up in the same bed, one light on, and them actually getting scared, properly scared, hearing about kids who are a little bit older than them having adventures. And it's just such a joy to read to them and have that impact. We don't read to each other as adults, do we? I read to my mum sometimes. Not enough. I should do that a bit more. Well, and then we say should, but maybe I could do it a bit more. We'll read some more of this in a second. Malcolm's called in. Good evening, Malcolm.
Hello, Ian. Listen, I actually thought I was tuning into BBC Radio 4 to Book Hour.
Oh, thank you.
No, I've just come in. I've just been out for a good night out to Kelly's Bar in Millsborough for the St. Patrick's Bash. It's been brilliant. So I've been out all day on the Guinness and all sorts, but I've come in tonight, put the radio on, and you've kind of relaxed us reading that book, and I just found it quite interesting. I've got a lot of books myself, in the house. Honestly, I laugh at this, but I don't read them.
Why have you got them?
Basically, what it was, to be honest with you, Ian, when I was younger, right, there was a book that used to come out every week. It was by Marshall Cavendish, the great writers.
Classics.
And yeah, that's them. And I collected all them. There's about, about 60 or 70 of the books, hardback books here as well. They were out in 1984.
And what are they? Like Great Expectations and A Tale of Two Cities, that kind of stuff?
Pride and Prejudice, Dracula.
They're heavy. They are heavy reads. That's kind of heavy stuff.
Yeah. There's some really good books in that, my collection there. I sometimes get one out, and read it from time to time, Scrooge, that kind of thing, and they've got a lot of Charles Dickens books in there. But I don't like Kindles, Ian. I don't know what you think of Kindles. I get a headache with a Kindle.
I'm not a fan of them. I prefer... There's something about having a bag weighed down by books and holding books and smelling books, and so I'm not a fan. But listen, if it gets people reading, it's brilliant. But I do prefer books.
Absolutely. I've just been turned the radio on, expecting to have a load of crackpots on the night, in the weekend, and I found you reading a book, and I thought, is this BBC Radio 4? I knew it was you. I just carried on listening. I thought, hey, that's an interesting book. I might get a hold of that myself and have a read through it.
You can get it for about a penny on eBay. On Amazon.
Really?
Yeah, about a penny probably.
Yeah.
Although we've sold.
Book there, is it? Or what?
2005, 12 years old. Gene Wilder, Kiss Me Like a Stranger, the autobiography it's called.
I might get that from my ex-partner, right? Because she used to perform in arts and dance and everything, so it might appeal to her, that kind of book, a bit romantic type of thing there. She's been to see that, what's that thing called again? Oh, God, I can't remember what it's called now. They've all got to see the pictures. What called that thing again?
What?
Something with grey. Oh, God.
Oh, 50 Shades of Grey.
That's the thing. 50 Shades Dark, however it's called.
Yes.
Been up to see that, and it's not... That's really go along. I said, you must be joking. I'm not going up there to watch that rubbish.
The first one was so... I took Dennis, who was on earlier on. Me and Kath took him to see the first 50 Shades of Grey, and it was a very boring film. The only thing that made it bearable was the scene where Mr. Grey opens the door to his sex dungeon. Dennis very loudly in the cinema in Luton said, "That looks like my spare room, that does."
About a few I've seen. But it's good to do this book thing, you should do it on a regular basis. They come on the radio, do a little book. Maybe somebody could write into you or phone in and recommend a couple of books that you could obviously, not like massive books, short books to read on the air and get people interested in reading.
Malcolm, I'm going to move on because I want to squeeze Jamie in and then we'll see if we can get a bit more of this book in. But thank you, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Evening, Jamie.
All right, mate, how you doing?
Good, thank you very much. What you got for us?
Reading. I love reading, and I read to my kids all the time. And we are just about... Your phone call has reminded me of when I was a kid. I used to read Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Oh, yeah, but Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson... and I've been lucky enough, I got to present an award, I think, to Ian Livingstone years ago at some... Because he does computer games now. And I got to give him an award, and I got to thank him for those... Warlock of Firetop Mountain was one of them.
I can't remember the titles, but they were all fantasies with dragons and...
Yeah, turn to page.
Brilliant.
Do you want to go left? Do you want to kill the dwarf, or do you want to stay and eat? Go to page 26 or page 93.
I reckon your boys would love it, because they get to interact with the story that you're reading with them.
That's not a bad idea, actually, Jamie. Thank you. Yeah, that is an excellent suggestion. Quickly
thank you, because you reminded me, so...
No, nice one, man. That's a really good idea. Thank you for that.
No worries. See you later, mate.
Cheers, Jamie. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that is a cracking idea. The oldest would love that. I've bought the oldest a guitar. We're going to make a guitar. We've got a guitar kit, right, and we're going to paint it and stuff. Well, I bought the youngest so he wouldn't feel left out. You can get these electric guitars that are like 3/4 the size, so they're smaller. Right? And I got it on eBay. It was 30 quid, and I thought, we'll get it. And But they both had haircuts tonight. Their hair's such a mess. They both look quite smart. And then my youngest, I got sent a picture of my youngest with this guitar strapped on, with his haircut and his school uniform, and he's looking to the side. That's an album cover. That is an album cover. Oh, what did he want to call? Because the band was originally called The Boys. Oh, but then the youngest came up with a brilliant name. Oh, get this. This came from him completely. I don't know where from. Electro. I like that. Anyway, look, we've got 8 minutes. We might squeeze chapter 4 in. It's a short. Oh dear. Someone sent us in a horribly racist email. Chapter 4. We might squeeze this in. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. The demon arrives. I suppose that everyone has had to wrestle with a demon at some time in their life. My demon came out of hiding on the first day of spring during my freshman year. It came out without warning, like a sudden eclipse of the sun. Not in the disguise of alcohol abuse or drugs or gambling or sexual perversion. Nothing like that. My demon came out in the form of a horrible compulsion to pray. I say horrible because I didn't want to pray. I had to pray. Wherever I was, even though I didn't know what I was supposed to be praying for. When the compulsion came upon me, I would pray in front of whichever building I was about to enter for my next class. I would speak to God out loud, but I tried to move my lips as little as possible when people passed by because I was afraid they'd think I was another one of those poor souls who hadn't bathed or changed clothes for a week, who usually smelled of urine as they mumbled up and down busy streets talking to God or the devil, oblivious of everyone around them. I was excruciatingly aware of everyone around me, but I thought that if I were truly humble, then the presence of all these passers-by shouldn't bother me. I kept on mumbling softly, trying to find out, as I prayed, what terrible thing I could possibly have done for which I needed God's forgiveness. The craziness reached a point where, one morning, I plastered down my curly hair with Vaseline, just to prove how truly humble I was. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a freak. I was so embarrassed I didn't know how I could leave the house and go to class, but I did. I walked into my theatre history class and sat next to my lunch pal, Betty Canzel. She used to make fun of me if I missed breakfast and she heard my stomach gurgling, but on this morning she kept staring at me. "What the hell did you do to your hair?" "I'm just trying something. I'll tell you later." "It looks horrible. Why did you do that?" "I told you, I'm just trying something. I'll tell you later." And then one day, just like that, as if a motor or an electric switch had been turned off, the compulsion stopped. The demon was gone. I felt as if I'd just finished running in a long race, exhausted but exhilarated, and could now be a normal person again. But 3 or 4 days later, the demon returned. The pattern repeated itself so often that I felt as Dr. Jekyll must have felt when he could no longer control the comings and goings of Mr. Hyde. I never knew how long each episode would last. 3 days, a week, 2 weeks. I never knew what set off the compulsion. The only small clue I had was wondering every once in a while why I should have the right to possess money, if I should ever acquire any, when there were people all over the world who were dying of starvation. Being on stage was the thing that saved me from myself. When I was in a play, I was safe. I did 4 plays in a row that first year, and then for the 5th production, I was cast as Willie Loman's son Bill in Death of a Salesman, the play that changed my life when I was 16 years old. On opening night, the auditorium was packed. We'd rehearsed for 4 weeks, and now I was lying on in my upstairs bedroom, on stage, waiting for the cue for my first entrance. I didn't want to pray. "Not tonight, dear God, please." Maybe the demon forced his way in because it was this particular play. As I waited for my cue, I kept thinking that I could shut him out in plenty of time. But I couldn't. The fear of not praying overpowered me, even though it was a matter of seconds before my entrance. I saw both the play and my brain falling apart. Then somehow, the obligation to the audience and Arthur Miller and my memory of Lee J. Cobb and Mildred Dunnock became more important to me than God. I heard my cue, said my first line, and I was safe for the remainder of the play. Years after that, I still carried the inexplicable conviction that once I stepped onto the stage, they couldn't get me, whoever the hell they were, and that I was safe, so long as the curtain was up. We'll finish this chapter. We'll get this in just in the nick of time. I drove home for the Easter break. My mother was so happy to see me that I thought she'd burst. She was thrilled that I was going to be home for 10 whole days. She laughed so much at my silly jokes that she peed in her pants again. "Now look what you've made me do, Jerry." After dinner, I found her in the living room sitting on the couch and weeping quietly. I sat beside her. "What, Mama, what's the matter?" She said, "In 9 more days you'll be gone." A little later, at about 7 o'clock, I said I was going to take a short walk around the neighbourhood. It was still light outside and I wanted to get some fresh air. After walking several blocks with the demon pounding at my consciousness trying to get in, I found myself at an open field on the outskirts of town, a field I used to play in only a few years before. The demon knew where he was leading me. I knelt down on the hard earth and started praying. We were never a particularly religious family when I was growing up, in the sense of prayers at home or rituals, other than going to my grandparents for a meal on Passover and going to the synagogue on the high holidays. Our religion was hugging and kissing each other, a boy being unashamed to kiss his father on the lips, and parents who showed affection in front of anyone. Our only doctrine had been, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So why did the demon invade my psyche when I was 18 years old? My only hope, as I prayed in that field, was to get rid of him once and for all. I covered all topics, everything and everyone whom I could possibly have wronged, including God, of course, and I asked for forgiveness. But in another part of my brain I was screaming, forgiveness? For what? I had no idea. But the strength of that absurdity couldn't pierce the armour of my compulsion. When I finished praying, I got up and walked home. My mother, my father, and my pregnant sister Corinne were all waiting in the living room in their dressing gowns. From the expression on their faces, I thought that someone had died. My mother started crying. My father spoke first. "We just called the police. They just left here. Do you know what time it is? It's 3:00 in the morning. Where were you? What in God's name were you doing? I couldn't bring myself to say, I was praying, Daddy. I was lying in a field praying to God to forgive me. And if he had said, forgive you? Forgive you for what? I would have said, I don't know. And he would have said, for 8 hours? Are you nuts? And he would have been right. So I mumbled something about having fallen asleep in a field because I was so tired. Then I apologised to all of them and went to my bedroom. End of chapter. Thank you for listening this week. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Catherine. We should be back on Monday at 10 o'clock. Until then, ta-ta.
Talk Radio. Dial up some dialogue.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.